Very good. Then let's go ahead and get started this evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning and Commission for the City of Tucson. My name is Lexi Wellett, and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. The responsibilities of this body are to advise the mayor and council and the Planning and Development Services Department on the adoption of long-range plans, policies, and specific plans and regulations that affect land use and development. Will staff call the roll, please?
Of course. Chair Wellett.
Here.
Vice Chair Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Zajir.
Here.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Here.
Commissioner Pafford. Absent. Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino.
Here.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Here.
Commissioner Warake.
Here.
Commissioner Lane. Absent. And Commissioner McCancy.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. I was muted there. Thank you all, commissioners, for being here this evening. I greatly appreciate you guys taking your time to join us this evening. So that moves us on to the next item, which is item number 2, approval of the legal action report from, that was last, I'm going to botch the date here, Dan. Let me find my agenda. That is the meeting minutes from October 26th, 2022. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'd second that.
So it looks like we have a motion and a second on that. So all commissioners in favor of approving the legal action report for October 26th, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Perfect. Hearing no nays there. It looks like motion passes. So that brings us on to item number 3, which is the continued item from last or 2 weeks ago hearing, which is the medical and adult use marijuana special exception process. And at this time, just like last week, I will be, or last hearing, I will be recusing myself for this item as well as the next item. So Vice Chair Martin is going to take over for the rest of the hearing. And so with that, I'll leave Vice Chair to carry on with the rest of the meeting. And again, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Lexi. I'd like to call next item number 3, public hearing C8-2205, medical and adult marijuana special exception UDC text amendment. Would staff please provide their presentation for item 3?
Of course, let me share my screen real quickly. Thank you, Chair Martin, Vice Chair Martin. Go. Oops, 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, great. All right. So this is item number 3. It is the medical and adult use marijuana special exception UDC text amendment. And this is a public hearing.
We just see you, Dan. So.
Oh, okay. Let me try it again. Hold on 1 second. I appreciate you letting me know that. See if that works.
Thank you.
Yep, of course. Thanks. Okay. Anyways, item number 3. This is the medical and adult use marijuana special exception UDC text amendment, and this is a public hearing. All right. So we were a little rushed first time that we went through this, so I'm just going to kind of take a little time to go through some of the background related to this and how we got to where we're at. Marijuana regulations in Arizona, there were really two major voter initiatives that have shaped marijuana in the state. First one was back in 2010, that was Proposition 203. That was the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act, and that is what legalized medical marijuana in the state of Arizona. At that time, the city of Tucson went through, modeled mainly off of the Arizona League of Cities model ordinance, adopted some initial regulations related to that. The second one that kind of guides what's going on in the state of Arizona is Proposition 207. This was the Arizona Start and Safe Act, and this was adopted in November 2020 by nearly 2/3 of the vote of the citizens of Arizona. And since then, we have had adult use marijuana that is legal within the state. So just to give you a little bit of background to kind of on Proposition 207, because that's really why we're here. So this was a voter approved measure. Again, 60% voted for it to legalize adult use marijuana. This included quite a few provisions, but these are some of the kind of touchstones on it. Limited marijuana possession, use, and cultivation by adults 21 and older. Personal possession of 6 marijuana plants for a single person and 12 marijuana plants for a household of 2+. It had a preference for new licenses. Initially, they were given to the existing medical marijuana dispensaries. That all happened kind of towards the beginning. And then there were an additional 26 licenses that were to be distributed with a preference to underserved areas and applicants from communities disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of previous marijuana laws. These were what people are calling social equity licenses. I think technically they're actually social equity applicants for a marijuana establishment license. And then adult use regulations shall not be more restrictive than current medical marijuana regulations. And you can restrict adult use regulations, but you can, if you do allow for them, they can't be more restrictive than medical marijuana regulations. And that's really important to what we're doing tonight. So related to those social equity applicants, and that's kind of why we're here, there were 26 of those adult use licenses for previously affected marijuana laws. Rulemaking was completed last December, and they began accepting applications immediately. 51% of the ownership team related to those needed to meet certain criteria, things like an applicant or family member must have either marijuana conviction expunged or is eligible to have that expunged. The applicant must make less than 400% of the poverty level for 3 of the last 5 years. And the applicant must be from a geographic area disproportionately impacted by marijuana laws. And there's a map of different geographic areas. Those licenses were distributed on April 8th, 2022. And we are here in front of you talking about allowing for those within the city of Tucson. So this right here are just the kind of different iterations of marijuana regulations that we've done in the city of Tucson, beginning back in 2010 with the initial kind of zoning ordinance. We came back, made some changes in 2014 related to industrial zones, really opening up, allowing for larger sizes and unlimited sizes in industrial zones, permitting infusion kitchens, and really kind of making adjustments at that time. We put a sunset date on it. Forced us to come back a couple years later, made some adjustments to the dispensary size, and adjusted some of the setbacks and things of that sort at that point. Put another sunset date on it, which had us come back in 2019. 2019, we came back, we made a couple minor changes. We added an odor mitigation. It was something we were hearing from constituents, concerns about odor, especially from cultivation facilities, and made some changes to lobby size and regulations related to that. So 2019, that was all medical up until that point. And then in 2021, we came back and we addressed adult use marijuana, essentially really the dual use applicants, and reduced several of our setbacks and different things related to that. So those amendments that we made back in 2021, these were kind of the touchstones of what we had done at that point. We permitted dual use marijuana dispensaries. So those are the ones that are both adult use and medical running together. We reduced setbacks to 1,000 feet for dispensaries and then 500 feet for treatment facilities, parks, and schools. We removed churches from the setbacks related to that. We created new marijuana manufacturing use that was allowed in the park industrial zone. Previously, cultivation was the only use we had, and manufacturing fit under that. But in order to kind of expand and allow within park industrial, which is more of a kind of technical, kind of softer industrial use, we created the new manufacturing use. We clarified some odor mitigation regulations back then. And then we restricted the adult use only licenses, those are those sexual equity ones, to allow to provide feedback to the rulemaking process. Just to kind of touch on the different types of licenses that we have here. There is the nonprofit medical marijuana license. Those are the original ones that came through. There were 130 of those issued by AZDHS. They had to remain in a certain location for a certain amount of time, and then they were able to relocate within the state. And then they were allowed to apply for an adult use license when those came on. There is the marijuana establishment license. Those are adult use only. There were 12 of those to underserved areas. There were counties that didn't have, that only had 1 or 0 dispensaries within them. And then there were 26 of those standalone licenses that were issued through the social equity program. Again, it's important that this may not be more restrictive than comparable medical regulations that are already in place. And then there's the dual use, which is basically was the conversion of these medical licenses. They applied for an establishment license, and then they became this dual use license. Right now, that is the only type of marijuana dispensary or license that is allowed to operate a dispensary within the city of Tucson. So just kind of related to that social equity program, there were 26 that were adopted and awarded back in April. They must be operational by October 23. So there's definitely a time constraint on this. So it's important. That's kind of part of the reason why it's important to kind of get this on the books and get it started so people can, so those licenses, if they were to locate in the city of Tucson, that they would have that opportunity. And really that's our role, is creating the rulemaking and initially providing input for the process, but then also being the ones who look at the zoning related to those properties or those licenses. So back in March 22nd, Mayor and Council provided direction to us to begin looking at this. So it was moved by Vice Mayor Santa Cruz and duly seconded to direct the city manager and staff to initiate the process for amending the UDC to establish a special exception process that would allow adult use marijuana establishments to locate within the city under specified conditions. From there, we went and we held a stakeholder meeting back in May. There were really 2 groups at that stakeholder meeting. There was support for a special exception or other process of such. A lot of the sentiment was to ensure that the social equity license holder met the intent of the law, provided community and nearby property owners opportunity to voice their concerns, and then potentially mitigate impacts on surrounding properties via site-specific conditions. At the time, there was a dispensary that was in town that had some issues related to parking, and I think there was a little bit of concern about impacts potentially for some of these dispensaries. There was also another group that believed the social equity licenses should be treated the same as dual use licenses. They believe they function the same way to medical and dual use applicants, and that requiring a special process of these applicants that they were not required of existing businesses makes the process more difficult for those who are intended to be helped. From that, we were at Planning Commission about a month ago or so with this proposal to add the special exception to all dispensary licenses within the city. This is some of the feedback we did receive there, just a discussion related to, does this proposal violate Proposition 207 with the 206 private property rights? So there's 2 different Proposition 207. This is the old Proposition 207, not the new one that was adopted in 2020. But it really, because it doesn't affect existing dispensaries and it is creating a new process but not restricting the use, we don't believe it would have an issue related to Proposition 207. There was just talk about the state's role versus the city's role. What does the state do? What does the city do? And then talks about we talked about benefits and drawbacks about adding a special exception. Things such as increased steps and time for applicants versus, having that notification versus surrounding property owners and neighbors, and how do we balance those? We have received some public comment as well since that meeting. So what we've heard is there's been support for the addition of the new special exception process. There's discussion about grandfathering and existing development packages and applications that are in review, and concern about the fact that if someone is currently in the process of either expanding or building a new dispensary, will they, and the law becomes effective, will they need to go back and get the special exception process? There was discussion about timing and applicability of that new special exception process and how that would work. There was a request for removal of the 25% lobby requirement. These are all in your materials as well. And then suggestion of a cannabis social equity program to kind of vet the social equity applicants as they come through. So in front of you is a draft proposal for adult use marijuana. This proposal is for a mayor and council special exception process for all marijuana dispensaries. This is because Arizona state law restricts zoning regulations for adult use marijuana that they may not be more restricted than medical. So it has to apply to all dispensaries. It can't just apply to the new social equity applicants as they come in, or adult use only. This new process would include a neighborhood meeting, public notification, and public hearing. The special exception process generally takes 6+ months to complete. And they must meet the findings related to distance from sensitive uses. So they would apply, they would show how they're meeting their distance from sensitive uses, and then they'd have to meet the special exception criteria that are required within the code. So this is essentially what that process is. Just to kind of walk through it. Again, mailed notification, a neighborhood notification for a neighborhood meeting to kind of start off. Of all properties within 400 feet and all neighborhood associations within 1 mile of the project. The applicant would submit it detailing how they meet the requirements of those use specific standards, which is generally the setbacks and odor mitigation and things of that sort. Staff would go through, review the proposal with a recommendation to the zoning examiner. There would be a public hearing, and mailed notice of that public hearing would be sent to all properties within 400 feet of the project and all neighborhood associations within 1 mile of the project. And then the notice of the public hearing would also be required to be posted on site in a local paper. So if you're driving by, walking by, you would know that there would be that proposal. Ultimately, there would be a public hearing before the zoning examiner. They would make a recommendation. And that recommendation would go to mayor and council, and there would be a public meeting before mayor and council for a decision. There could also be a public hearing. It would have to be requested by the public after the zoning examiner recommendation. So this is what you have. It's really 4 parts, and then there's a little bottom portion, which I'll talk a little bit about. We are recommending to revise the use tables in UDC section 4.8 to change marijuana dispensaries from a permitted use in C2 and C3 zones to a mayor and council special exception. We are proposing to remove the restriction on marijuana establishment licenses. Those are the adult use only ones. In UDC section 4.9.9.E.1, use specific standards. And then we're recommending to change the definition of marijuana dispensary so it includes medical marijuana licenses, dual use licenses, as well as the marijuana establishment license. There is a small cleanup of a previous zoning administrator determination clarifying that offset cultivation use is a wholesaling use and not a retail use. And then at the very bottom here, this is kind of related to the whole grandfathering question and concern about a project that's already in process once this becomes effective. So we are recommending adding language to the ordinance to address those development packages that are already in progress once the new regulations become effective. Wouldn't live in the code because 6 months down the road where there are no more of these that are in process, it wouldn't make sense for it to be in the code, but it can be drafted into the ordinance in order to address some of those concerns related to that. With that, staff recommends Planning Commission approve a motion to recommend adoption of the medical and adult use marijuana special exception UDC text amendment to the City of Tucson Mayor and Council. And we're happy for any questions, either before or after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to open up the questions by the commissioners to staff. If you have any, I'll try to, let's see, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino has a question, and then Commissioner Cassidy.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martin. Just a quick clarification about the added language for development packages currently in process that would allow them under the current code. They'd be grandfathered in under the current, correct? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, that is correct. It would allow for them to continue, as long as they have their complete development package within review, to, yes, be approved under the current code instead of the new code that comes in.
Thank you.
Mr. Cassidy.
Thank you. Dan, you had on one of your slides a list of comments from the public. Were any of those comments addressed in the draft that's being brought before us tonight?
Yes, really, most of the comments that we received related to that, let me see if I can find this, were related to the kind of grandfathering and existing development packages for review, and those and the timing and applicability. So ultimately, the grandfathering portion would be addressed through the ordinance. And then the timing and applicability, we just kind of looked into that's more of a clarifying thing, but you would be able to submit concurrently. It depends on how much risk you're willing to do your take, but you could submit concurrently with your development package and your special exception and do those at the same time, cutting down on time for that.
Okay, was consideration given to removing the 25% lobby requirement?
So we are kind of indifferent to that. I don't think at this point it may, it may or may not be a significant, I guess, regulation. So if the Planning Commission were to recommend that, I think that would be something that Mayor and Council would look upon and potentially adopt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner McCancy.
Yes, thank you. This question precedes perhaps some of the specific information in your slides there, Dan, but I'm still having trouble, and I have to preface this by saying I am new to this process, so please take that into account. But could somebody explain briefly what is the connection between, those who were disadvantaged by previous marijuana laws and how they're going to benefit from this special exemption process?
So Commissioner McCanty, basically the idea would be that we would be, because currently they are prohibited from locating within the City of Tucson. We would be allowing for them to locate within the City of Tucson, so long as we were able to make sure that they weren't having a negative impact on surrounding areas and things like that. So that would be the benefit for them. They would be able to, they would have more areas that they could potentially locate.
I don't see, I guess I don't see how that's mitigating all the disadvantage that they incurred by the previous marijuana laws. Like if they were in prison or whatever, I don't see how any of this mitigates that, but there must be something I'm not seeing here.
So ultimately, just to kind of let you know that the process related to the social equity applicants and everything was all really done at the state level. So it was all basically laid out in Proposition 207. So there's very little that we as a city have as far as leverage or the ability. Basically what we can do is we can either restrict the social equity applicants, or we can allow for them. And if we allow for them, then we would have to have the same regulations for both dual use, medical, and them. That's essentially where we're at with it as a city.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Commissioner Zagier?
Hi. There was a part on comments made, the cannabis social equity program. I believe someone who sent in a letter, Dan Gauthier, sent in a letter, and he was pointing out how this might look as far as how do you determine who fulfills this type of situation, as far as benefiting those who might have been affected negatively, as far as maybe they're a drug arrest or, you know, less than an ounce of pot or something like that. And so he was throwing something out there where the businesses would actually have to throw in, I guess, money to deal something with that. I'm not sure. Are you actually looking at something like that? But this would not be a part of the UDC code. So,
Commissioner Zagier, what we're looking at here is really just zoning. So we would review the application based on, you know, whatever, if they meet the zoning criteria, if they meet the setbacks. You know, this is kind of similar to what the county has recently done. I know they recently had 3 projects that have gone through their process, 2 of which met all the setbacks and everything and ended up getting a favorable recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. The 3rd one, there were concerns about parking. So they added a site-specific condition just to make sure that they striped 6 more parking spots to make sure that they could handle it. That's kind of how the process works, but it's all related to zoning and land use.
okay, so the social equity program is related more to who gets the licensing in the first place. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. And that's all done at the state through the Arizona Department of Health Services.
Okay, thank you.
See, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino has another question. No?
I knew it as soon as I started talking. Since April of last year, when we passed this ordinance the first time, or again, how much feedback has the city received on this rulemaking process, or has that just been more recently since, you know, this UDC text amendment has started the process? Has there been continual feedback, or is it just more recently?
So I will say that most of the feedback has been more recently in the last couple months. We've had some conversations related to it. We've also been watching the county to see how they've been dealing with it and learning from their process, which again was passed maybe a month or 2 ago.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz?
Thanks. Apologies. I think this is a question you probably answered, but what is it about our current zoning code that restricts these applicants in particular from getting licensing? Is it just that there's like already a cap on the number of licenses, or is it something in particular about these applicants that makes it so that they can't already do this and need an exception?
Yeah, so Commissioner Schwartz, that's a good question. So what happened was, back when we adopted the adult use, the dual use license regulations, I think it was June 2021, is that we put mayor and council directed us to put a restriction on those license types until the rulemaking was complete. So the rulemaking was still in process at that point. We as a city provided feedback to that process. And then ultimately the rulemaking was completed in December. They started accepting those applications. And then ultimately awarded those applications in April. So that's the reason why the restriction was put on. It was put on by us, the city, but we have the ability to remove that.
Any other commissioners have questions for staff? Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes, one more. If this was in your slides, I apologize, or maybe from an earlier meeting, but how many applicants were there originally for these 26 licenses? And what was the reasoning behind handing them out randomly as opposed to prioritizing the applications?
So Commissioner McCancy, ultimately, I believe it was written drafted into Proposition 207 as far as how it would be distributed. So again, it was all kind of done at the state level. There were over 1,000 applicants. I'm not sure of the exact number, but there were a lot of applicants that were in that pool.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions? So Dan, when do you think this would go to mayor and council, and then would it be a 30-day appeal period, or is that?
Yeah, so the way it would basically work is, I think the nearest day, should this be recommended, would be December 20th, and then it would be a 30-day period. So it would become effective 30 days after that, which I think is the 19th of January. There's 31 days in December.
So with that, grandfathering, people have until towards the end of January to get their applications in. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing. Dan, did you have any speakers? I saw that Mr. Gauthier wanted to speak in his letter, but did you have anybody else? Or? I think you're muted again, so.
Yes, I had actually emailed you the list, but let me get it real quickly and I'll send it to you. I'll pop it in the. Okay, hold on one second. Did that pop up for you?
Went to my junk folder.
Oh, huh. Yeah, so I also sent it in the chat for you, so you can maybe read it off that.
Yeah, I found it. I just found it in my junk folder. So.
Okay, cool. Good deal.
And that's why you said at 4:55 this afternoon. I'm guessing. Okay, I'm going to open this up for a public hearing and request that those who'd like to speak to the planning commission at this time. I'm going to have a 3-minute time limit because it looks like we have a lot of speakers. Be timely, please. If somebody's stated your position, please don't repeat it. We'd like to just hear new things. So I think the first person on the list is Michael Crawford. Can you give your name and address when you speak?
Sure. My name is Mike Crawford. I live at 1900 North Fremont Avenue in Tucson. Good evening, everybody. I'll try to be quick, try to answer some of the questions that I think other board members have. First of all, let me disclose that I do have a financial interest in a couple of the dispensaries currently in Tucson. And what I'm about to tell you is against my own financial interest. I think that, and again, given the amount of time, I'll try to be as quick as I can, is that, when medical marijuana was legalized back in the day, everybody passed the model city ordinances, which were really restrictive. Over the last several years, the Planning Commission has done a really good job of pulling back those restrictions because they were unnecessary. And they were slowing down or impeding the process of us expanding operations and bringing in more employment to the city of Tucson. What happened with the social equity licenses is that the proposition is the one that it called for them to be issued, these 26 additional licenses after the fact. Mayor and council last year didn't like the end product that was, at least this is my opinion again, didn't like, and I didn't either, particularly like how the state decided to divvy those licenses out. The application process was kind of flawed in that it allowed a lot of these multi-state operators to basically hire people that met the criteria to get these licenses. So of the 26 licenses that were issued, there was probably 16 of them that were obtained by multi-state operators. That's other, and some of them got 6, some of them got 5, some of them got 4. And I think what the council was trying to do with when they amended the UDC last year, when they said no to any social equity licenses, was to try to get some rein in this and try to make sure that we got real social equity licenses in the city. The problem was that as the regular or the proposition says, you can't regulate them differently than you can, joint or establishment licenses or dual licenses. So, I mean, what I would ask you to do is to not put this special use permit on any of the licenses. There's a limited number of licenses in the state of Arizona. They've done a good job of making sure we don't get a glut of licenses. You've just pulled back all the setback requirements. The locations of these licenses is already restricted extensively by the zoning code, which has to meet all of these setbacks. I'm not sure what the special use are going to be reviewing other than the setback requirements, which the city already does a really good job of doing. They go through, they extensively review the setbacks, make sure everything's met. So again, I'm all for regulation. This is the most heavily regulated industry in the state, probably next to nuclear power. I don't think that you need, I mean, you got cameras, you got security, we get inspected multiple times a year. Again, if you look at this throughout the city of Tucson and the dispensaries that are currently here, there's been basically one issue, and that was with the property on Grant Road where they had not enough parking, and they decided to open it up to adult use without dealing with that issue. Other than that, almost all the dispensaries in town have had no major issues with their neighbors and no major issues with needing some special use permit requirement that's going to delay things 6 or 7 months. One particular issue, though, if you do approve it, is I would ask that you remove if a current dispensary is going to expand, there is a number that they've come up with, 25%, that if they expand more than 25%, then they got to go through this process. I would actually ask it, in addition to removing the 25% lobby requirement, that you also remove that, or recommend that get removed from the requirement. If a current dispensary is going to try to expand their property more than 25%, that they not have to go through this special use permit process. Again, I think you have the right to recommend to the city council, based on looking at everything and listening to all the input, that they not make a special use permit. You can allow these social equity licenses in the city, or you cannot allow them. You're allowed to do that. City's allowed to do that. If you're going to let them in, then let's just stay with what we got. We got restricted zoning, we got restricted setback requirements. And so that's what I would ask you to do. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Next speaker is Lauren Niehaus. I'll come back. Try again. Next speaker is Dimitri Downing.
I don't see Dimitri here tonight.
Next speaker is Dan Gauthier. No, I saw him on the list earlier.
Good evening, Vice Chair Martin. Can you hear me, folks?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Dan Gauthier. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll keep this short. I work for a company called Zone Properties. Zone Properties provides advisory, brokerage, and investment services to the cannabis industry, both in Arizona and across the country. Wanted to thank staff for what I think is a very thorough and well done presentation on the license structure in Arizona. Zoned has spent a number of years, close to a decade, identifying qualified real estate for operators and other stakeholders, like I said, in Arizona, excuse me, and across the country. There are always challenges that come up in getting these sites approved for use. Certainly understand and appreciate the thought and the work that goes into making sure that dispensaries and cultivation facilities and other businesses that are in the regulated cannabis industry need to qualify for to get open, consistent with community planning. Given the current environment, with so many municipalities in the state prohibiting marijuana establishment licenses outright, which is the current status quo in the city of Tucson, as well as the tight time frame required to get these licenses open and operational. October of 2023 is that outside date. These social equity license holders are already in a major bind in finding qualified real estate and essentially getting that site built out and open by October. So if the second largest city in Arizona can sort of pave the way for a small number of sites to be approved in the city of Tucson, that really does help loosen the bottleneck on the lack of qualified properties statewide, and gives business owners a greater chance of success in Tucson, and to better serve the residents of Tucson and the voters that approved Prop 207. I just want to, again, thank staff and the commission for their time and the opportunity to speak. Happy to answer any questions either here tonight or as follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gauthier. The next speaker I have is Patrick Maroney.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to speak. I think Dan and I both registered. We're with the same company, so I'm just listening. And I echo Dan's thoughts, but thanks to everyone for giving us the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker I have is Zara Livier. Sorry.
Hi, this is Rana Leshgary. Zara wasn't able to make it today, but we have Lillian Bernal on the line who could speak. If she's given the opportunity, that would be wonderful.
Go ahead.
Lillian, could you unmute and make your statement, please?
Hello, Chair and Commission members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the proposed special exception process tonight. My name is Lillian Bernal. I am a local cannabis advisor and advocate for equity and workers' rights. A successful cannabis industry in Tucson needs more than just a quick, easy path forward for the license holder. There are several other stakeholders needed to make sure Tucson has a cannabis industry that aligns with our community values. In order to have a better dispensary industry, we need transparency and accountability, which means we need responsible owners, equitable pay and treatment of employees, and we need to make sure the community has a voice. The special exception process doesn't fix everything, but it does give the community a voice. A public hearing in front of your commission and council gives that community a chance to participate in this important process. It's very important that the public hearing process include mayor and council, since they are the ones accountable to the public. And it sends a message to dispensary owners that they are accountable to our community and to our elected officials.
Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Edimian Bragg. Sorry. I'll come back. Next speaker is Gino Ranocchio.
Commissioner Martin, I believe that you may have an older list. I think Maddie Halley is next on the list. There were some last minute changes around 5:20 or so.
Okay, I have the 4:55 list. Of course.
Hello. I'm speaking on behalf of Alex Johnstone. He couldn't be here today. Hi, my name is Alex Johnstone, and I'm a Tucson resident. I am again urging you to support Mayor and Council's request to create a special exception process for all marijuana dispensaries. As Mayor Romero has stated, the social equity program designed by the state has let us down. It has not resulted in 26 social equity licenses, even though we continue to refer to them by that title. The truth is, the program was hijacked by non-equity cannabis companies, many names you would recognize. The result is that many of the 26 licenses that may apply in Tucson will not be equitable at all, but rather they will fall into the hands of those trying to maximize profit and remove the licenses from those who deserve them the most. But how will we know, and do we care? Yes, our community does care. While the special exception process will focus on land use, and rightfully so, it will still provide a critical layer of oversight for the types of businesses that will be entering our city. This is vital to the community fabric and fair treatment of businesses trying to enter this competitive market. As a community member, I want a process that includes public hearings and mayor and council approval. Our council wants that as well. So please support us in recommending and supporting the special exception process to protect Tucson and to make sure that our elected officials have a layer of oversight on the businesses that want to open in our neighborhoods to protect our community from bad actors in this industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, I believe, is, we heard from Lillian. I think we skipped Gail Lutz.
Hi, I'm Gail Lutz. So, hi, my name is Gail Lutz. I'm here speaking as a member of UFCW. Through my work with UFCW, I've spent a lot of time canvassing and speaking to folks in our state. On behalf of UFCW Local 99, we urge you to approve the mayor and council's request to create a special exception process for all dispensaries. Any homeowner, neighboring business owner, or property owner would want a process in place which allows them to have notice of a dispensary coming into their neighborhood and an opportunity to be heard in a public hearing about zoning and land use decisions in their community, and ultimately the approval of their elected officials, mayor and council. A special exception process would allow for that to happen. I know that many industry owners and dispensary associations have been opposing this item but on behalf of the community members, I urge you to support the special exception process. As a community inclusive union, we believe it is important in having a public process that includes a diversity of voices, perspectives, and opinions beyond just cannabis industry owners. UFCW Local 99 has led the discussion on fairness, equity, and transparency in the cannabis industry, and contrary to industry claims, shortcutting this process by failing to include a special equity procedure will not level the playing field. It will allow the deepest pockets to land grab as many locations as they want and push everyone else out. Please don't remove the public's voice. Please support us, our members, our community, and mayor and council's request for a special exception. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rana Lashkari.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Anna Leshgary. I'm an attorney, and I also represent UFCW Local 99. UFCW represents cannabis workers nationwide and over 25,000 food and commercial workers in Arizona. First, I would like to applaud Mayor Romero, Council, and thank staff for putting forward the special exception procedure for consideration tonight. From our perspective, we know that the special exception procedure will only improve the industry and improve the relationship between the dispensaries and the communities they sit in. You heard a lot about the different kinds of licenses tonight: nonprofit dispensaries, medical dispensaries, dual license, and now social equity licenses. Regardless of the type, we know that the special exception procedure will level the playing field for all license holders. As you also heard, most of the state prohibits these adult use, or what's referred to as social equity licenses. We support Tucson opening up to new dispensaries, But we've also seen people want to create a shorter process or shortcut for opening dispensaries in Tucson, and they do it in the name of social equity. We think that's a misleading request. And we think it's really important that you know that of those 26 social equity licenses that have been released, the bulk of them no longer have a social equity component. By the time they come to open in Tucson, the social equity applicant may have been bought out. Many of them, as you heard, are either industry sponsored or backed by industry investors. So there's really nothing social equity about them anymore. Given that background and given what we know about the industry and the issues we've seen, we know the best strategy for the city is to initiate the process, the special exception process, to address dispensary licensing needs across all categories fairly and equally, with public hearings and mayor and council review. Regardless of the type of license, the community will have an opportunity to participate in a public hearing process, with the ultimate decision being made by our elected officials. With neighborhood input, public notification, and ultimately more transparency and accountability, we can create a better cannabis industry for Tucson. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Allison Solomon.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address the Planning Commission. As an organization that has worked on this policy from its inception, I would like to thank the staff and the commission for the continued consideration, the work on this. As we know, this is a very complex policy, and it is one that is very new to not just the state, but the nation as a whole. I would like to request that when consideration is given to the applicants, we take into consideration the fact that there was a development package submitted, that the time clock should start there. My main concern with policy, when looking at it from the perspective of the land use and development industry, is that there is predictability and consistency. I do believe that by grandfathering at the development package stage, that provides a higher level of predictability and consistency for those who might be doubling down or entering the market. And this is not new, as staff has made known in their recommendations for consideration in policy. We have seen this done with impact fees. We have seen this done for electric vehicles. We have seen this done for sign code, a variety of different policies. I believe it is best to have consistent, streamlined code changes, and I support all of the work that staff has done. I appreciate the opportunity to engage, and I thank the city for being forward-thinking on this policy. If the commission has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon. The next speaker is Mo Asani.
Vice Chair Martin, I don't believe he is here tonight.
Next speaker on the list is Jim Mazzacco.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I'm a consultant, and I'm representing Green Med Dispensary at 6464 East Tancaverde Road. And we understand the staff position is for new dispensaries that will come into existence because of the 2020 proposition and the implementation of the Arizona Department of Health Services Social Equity Lottery that allocated 26 dispensaries to qualified applicants, And as several speakers in the past talked, these applicants have sponsors who are large dispensary owners. So 18 of them, at least in a New Phoenix Times article, were sponsored by large companies. So there will be probably some millionaires and multimillionaires among those 26 qualified applicants. The scope of this social equity program is disappointing and meager, and a lot of people are unhappy with how it used the term social equity to achieve the dispensation of these dispensaries that are now going to be owned by large companies and large corporations. The mayor and council special exception process, there's two public hearings, zoning examiner, mayor and council. They have hard zoning standards and some broader performance standards to make sure there's not a problem. I have to agree with the first speaker, Mr. Crawford, that this is probably overkill in zoning. Of the 14 dispensaries out there, they're all meeting those standards and not really causing zoning any kind of nuisance problems that I'm aware of. I used to be a city employee. I was involved with the 2014 amendment of the marijuana laws. I sat down with the chief of police. There was concern, are there crimes being committed around dispensaries? No, they were fine by what the chief of police told me at that time. This is 8 years later, so there aren't any big crime issues or zoning nuisance issues associated. The one thing I do agree with staff is having all the new dispensaries go in front of mayor and council. But I wouldn't have them going in front of mayor and council necessarily for zoning. If they have to and they want to follow this, fine. But what I've talked about, and I'm the one who's been talking about a cannabis social equity program. And my point is, if the state can have a cannabis social equity program, the city can too. And the city can have one that implements its general plan policies on workforce development and support of local businesses and encouraging entrepreneurial practices. So, and it would require a remediation fee. That's what I would like the new dispensaries to be talking to mayor and council about. How much money are they going to donate to scholarships for qualified applicants from the city? Or how many internships can they donate in their business for qualified applicants in the city? That's where I think the city could make a difference. And unfortunately, I don't believe that the special exception itself lives up to the principle of social equity. It's doing what mayor and council told them to do. There has to be a zoning component. I gave you a packet. It has a zoning component to it that's very modest. It's saying the only special exception you really need is a planning and development services director special exception, which notifies people within 400 feet. If there's going to be a parking issue, that director and his staff are going to find it in that. The other part of it is a cannabis social equity ordinance. It's outside of zoning. It's another part of the city code. And in that one, it sets up a process for creating a job program. It's just a draft, but it's something we hope that when this goes in front of mayor and council, that if they're going to have a mayor and council special exception, they're also talking about donations or required remediation funds that actually go toward our citizens in the city of Tucson. So if you make a motion on this, I would hope that you would at least recommend to mayor and council that they study a social equity program that has scholarships or funding similar to something like we planted the seed here for you to look at. The other item that I would hope you would also look at is how many dispensaries are really necessary in the city of Tucson. There's 14 now, and there's a precedent here. The state had a cap when they first created medical marijuana in 2010. And when they came back to you in 2020, they put another cap and said, okay, it's only 26 dispensaries. It's prudent for the state to
wrap it up
to that amount, that to have a cap too. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go back, see if Ms. Niehaus is here tonight. Not seeing that. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to the commission? Oh, maybe help me down, see if there are any hands raised. I'll see none. You don't say about Dan. See none. I'd like to ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
A motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. I'd like to open up for general I'm sorry, discussion between the commissioners on the proposed amendment? Is there anybody that would like to speak to the? No one? Great.
I can go ahead and open this.
Okay.
up.
Oh, there they are. There the hands are. Sorry.
So I work with special exception land use processes often in my job. I typically go for substations as opposed to dispensaries. The difference that I see in this particular process is that a substation is allowed in most any zone with the special exception process. And that special exception process is there so that they can meet certain requirements to that zone. This, we've already told them that they can be in C2 and C3. We've already told them what requirements they have to meet, and they meet those at the development package state. So what we're doing is we're just adding additional work, additional process for, I don't really know what reason. When it comes to the social equity piece, that's that's state. We don't have the ability to say one thing or the other about who was receiving those licenses, whether or not it was fair, whether or not people who received those special equity licenses deserve them. That's not on us to decide anymore. That's fact. So by doing this process, I feel like we are using the zoning code for a political process as opposed to what it's meant to do and regulate uses within zones. I think that the timing issue is really, really tight. I think we're going through this process very late. We should have been doing this a long time ago if we were going to be fair to other applicants. And I have several issues with it that I might be able to articulate after other people chime in, but I'd be happy to cede the floor with that.
Anybody, any other commissioners have any comments or questions? Commissioner Zagier?
Hi, I raised my hand and then lowered it
I
again.
saw.
After Commissioner Pena was speaking, it was like saying, kind of voicing the things that's been floating around in my head. And as far as some of the presentations and the comments submitted in the public hearing, written and verbal, I do question the state's cannabis social equity program, whatever it is. A lottery, something like a lottery like this is, without any regulation as far as, okay, are they in the same financial status they were when they applied for it or put their name in the lottery as when the business opens? And I don't know if the state has anything like that. Many of the people have suggested that there should be some kind of funding that the cannabis industry pays towards education or promoting fields in the cannabis industry. I personally don't know. But what I was going to bring up is, can something like this, I don't know, Commissioner Pino said, well, it's a state problem. Is it a state problem or a state issue? Can the city, I don't know, that's probably up to the city attorney, the city manager, and I don't know if it's something that can be suggested when we send this on to the mayor and council. Just a question.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I'm still sort of bothered by the fact that we're setting up whatever zoning or whatever other restrictions for social equity license holders when it doesn't appear to be clear to myself or maybe some others what the social equity part of this is. I realize now that it's all that part was set up by the state, but I thought I heard Dan or somebody else say that while we don't have any authority to change, how they define social equity or how they gave out those licenses or whatever, we do have the ability to say yay or nay to having them put these sites into the city. So, there seems to be some sort of mechanism to say, okay, if we don't like the social equity aspect of this, or if it's pretty much non-existent, or we can't correlate it to social equity or social justice for our own community, then, why even have these establishments at all? We could have just other kinds of medical marijuana or adult use marijuana facilities.
Thank you, Commissioner Cassidy.
Thank you, Chair Martin. I support the amendment as written with the special exception process, and I feel that way because of the comments that we've gotten from the community, both through the meeting that happened earlier this year that was reported in the meeting materials. So we saw about 50% of the attendees were supportive of that special exception process, and I think we need to pay attention to that. And I also heard from a lot of our commenters tonight that they were supportive of the special exception process. So I, for one, would be willing to vote for the amendment as written. If any of the other commissioners have an opinion on the lobby requirement, I could go either. But I do support the special exception process.
Thank you. I had a question for Dan. The October date, they have to be open and operating?
Vice Chair Martin, yes, it would have to be, they have to be operational by October 23. I think it's the end of October, but yes, up and running.
So that kind of eliminates any new construction that have to be moving into existing buildings or something like that. Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, you said you had some other things you'd like to discuss, or?
Yeah, Commissioner McKenzie had his hand up before me. He wants to speak. It's fine.
Oh, I've already spoken. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so speaking to that point about the timing here, I think it's essentially regulating any new dispensaries, social equity licenses out of existence. So, and Dan, please correct me here because I'm going to spout some numbers in the code here, but through the zoning examiner special exception process, you would need 70 days from the application acceptance for that public hearing. After which the recommendation from the zoning examiner goes to mayor and council. The public has 14 days to request that another public hearing at mayor and council happen. It's a mayor and council's public hearing isn't required, but has to be appealed for within 14 days of the zoning examiner's decision. And then notice period, I'm not sure exactly how long, but we're talking around 90 days at this point. And then a 30-day period after that for post decision appeals. So we're, and that's not precluding any like occupancy certifications and things that actually get them in the door and operational by October 31st. So the window for this is incredibly small. And again, barring whether or not they are truly social equity, we're regulating them out of the ability to open in the first place. And so I'm wondering do these licenses go back into a pool to be reopened, or do they just stop? Are there just no more licenses after these 26? If we've told them if they can't open by the 31st of October 23, do new licenses come up, or are they just done?
So Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, it sounds to me like they'll have to reissue licenses, but there's also been discussion at the state that they might end up passing something to address it. So I'm not entirely sure. That's again something that occurs at the state level.
Yeah. I think my biggest concern here is that we've allowed medical and then dual use to open within these zones and very restricted zones. We deregulated many of them last year in April. And now we're saying, okay, but you guys are different. You guys need to be regulated more. But because we can't regulate you differently, we'll just apply it to everyone else that already exists. And there's some disparity that I don't think is fair there. Especially if, you know, someone say, oh, you're biased against social equity, whether or not they truly are social equity or not, it's an argument that could be made. So why are we, I just don't understand why we're trying to do it if not for a political purpose. And I understand that marijuana is new, it's still not federally legal, it's change, but it's something that I think is being treated differently here. And I don't understand why, and I don't like it. That's just me. I will not be voting to approve, to recommend.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have any comments? I guess my comments are, I'm a little concerned about timing too, being in the business of trying to process projects. But saying that, I'd like to ask if anybody would like to make a motion. I suggest that it include the request of mayor and council to grandfather any applications that are already submitted up to the date the ordinance goes into effect. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I will move to recommend adoption of and I don't have your slide in front of me, Dan, right now, so forgive me if I mess it up, but I'll make a motion to adopt the changes to the code as recommended by staff, and with the further stipulation that Vice Chair Martin just mentioned, with the existing applications in the process being grandfathered in.
Do I have a second?
I second that motion.
Who was that seconded? I'm sorry.
Sorry, that was me, Commissioner Wadake.
Okay, thank you. Have a motion and a second.
I would like to make a substitute motion.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that I don't know how to make this recommendation here, or the motion, but the motion to allow a negative recommendation. I do not want to recommend this. I would like to make a recommendation that the mayor and council do not continue with the special exception process for social equity licenses.
Guess I'm kind of new to this, so I need to ask for help me out. Do I need a second, or the maker of the initial motion?
Second it. I second it.
I haven't done this before, Dan, or
Let's check with council to make sure we're doing things properly. Period. Do you mind providing a little guidance?
When there's a substitute, has to be voted on before a vote can be taken on the main motion. So yeah, there has to be a motion, a second, and a vote. If the substitute motion passes, the main motion is dropped. If it fails, then we go back to the vote on the main motion.
Great, thank you.
so your recommendation, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, is a negative negative recommendation to mayor and council.
Yeah, I apologize for not being able to articulate that correctly, but that I would like to make a motion that the mayor and council do not continue with the special exception process, which kind of drops the need for the grandfathering in of development packages. Yeah, I might need some help clarifying that, but
The recommendation not against the UDC text amendments.
yes,
So,
thank you.
Quick clarification, I'm sorry. Would that be, so no special exception process, but allowing for the marijuana establishment licenses? So it would be removing the restriction of the marijuana establishment licenses, is that correct?
Correct, so that all licenses would operate under the current zoning that they are allowed in, that we passed in April of 2021. Thank you.
But then there's the other text amendments. You're just talking about the special exception.
Yeah,
Changes to the special exception.
is there a way to bring up the rest of those proposed amendments?
Yes, give me 2 seconds, hold on. Mhm. Okay, so that was the motion. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
So you're just recommending not approval of the rest of the text amendments except for revising the tables.
Correct. So removing restrictions on marijuana establishments, changing the definition, and cleaning up the zoning administrator determinations. Well, a negative recommendation to the change for special exception.
So it's recommendation approval for items 2 through 4 and not for item 1. So
That's correct. Thank you for clarifying that. That was very messy on my part.
is that okay with the motion? Commissioner Zagier that made the second?
Yes.
Having a motion and second to have a positive recommendation for items 2 through 4 and a negative recommendation for item 1 to the mayor and council. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those in favor say nay.
I'm opposed. I'll say nay.
Dan, do you want to do a roll call? Just
Yes, we will do a roll call. Hold on. All right. Chair Willett absent. Vice Chair Martin.
aye.
Commissioner Zagier.
Aye.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Nay.
Commissioner Pafford absent. Commissioner Young. I'm sorry, Commissioner Young.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Ortiz-Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Aye.
Commissioner Wadrake. Commissioner Lane absent. Commissioner McCancy.
Wait, I'm present.
Oh, sorry, you're okay. Sorry, Commissioner Lane.
Aye.
Commissioner McCancy.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes with a favorable recommendation of 7-2.
And I hope that would include the recommendation. No, we don't need the grandfathering anymore, I guess. That's right. So. All right, thank you, everybody.
One quick question.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. This is a question for council. Commissioner Lane did show up. We need to make sure that, do we need to go through and do another roll call, or just announce that she is here? Okay.
What was the question?
Oh, just so Commissioner, it's hard to tell when a commissioner comes in and out of the meeting. Commissioner Lane wasn't here when we did roll call earlier. I was just wondering if we needed to redo a roll call or just announce that she is here.
Yeah.
We can always go back and check the Zoom record to get the exact time for the legal action report.
Okay, I think it wouldn't. I would recommend that you do the roll call and then go ahead and do the vote.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Your question is, do you have to do another roll call right now?
I think it was I think we missed it. I don't know. I was just wondering if we needed to do like a full roll call for it, but I guess we just did the vote, which was a roll call of sorts.
Right. And every commissioner who's there voted just now.
Yes.
So that was the roll call. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't think
Okay.
there's the necessity to do another one at this point.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to call the next item, item number 4, public hearing C8-2201 infill incentive district update UDC text amendment. Staff like to give their presentation. You're muted, Dan, so.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Chair Martin. This is item number 4, infill incentive district update UDC text amendment public hearing. And Acacia is going to start off with the background, and then I'll talk a little bit about the proposal. So thanks.
Thanks, Dan, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to give some background on the IID. It is an important zoning tool that's due for a review and an extension based on a sunset date that was set in 2019. So that sunset date is January 31st of next year, which feels like it's quickly approaching. So this is also on a tight timeline. We've been working on this review and the proposed update since Mayor and Council provided direction in February of this year, directing staff to begin the IID review and engage stakeholders and neighbors in the community. So just to cover the basics, the infill incentive district is an optional zoning overlay. It's shown in colored areas here on this map, covering the downtown area, the streetcar route, along with some commercial corridors that extend out from that urban core. Property owners can choose to use the IID standards that are designed to result in a more walkable, more transit-oriented, more mixed-use urban built environment than our underlying zoning allows. It provides flexibility and incentives in exchange for meeting design standards and historic preservation. It was first established in 2006, but it's been modified and updated over time, especially in connection to investment in the Sunlink streetcar. And as I mentioned, it's been reviewed over its lifetime, adjusted where needed to be an effective tool for transit-oriented development. Between 2013 and 2015 was the last time it underwent The most significant changes and decisions made in 2019 include the sunset date that we're working towards now. So a major component of the IID process is the steps involved in that, and I'll just give a quick summary of that here. Developing a project using the IID starts with a preliminary meeting. It's a first round of feedback that an applicant will get about their proposal, and a big indicator of how the process proceeds is if that project location or its thresholds make it a major or minor review. Important part of the process is a noticed and hosted and documented neighborhood meeting. That's included in the application. And then another key component of this process is the design review. All projects undergo the review by a design professional, but major reviews also include input from the IID Design Review Committee, and that includes a member of the affected neighborhood. So recommendations from these reviews, public comment, all of that application is sent to the PDSD director who makes a decision. And all up for the IID portion of a project without complications, a major review can take 4 to 6 months, and a minor review can take about 2 months. So what have the outcomes of the IID included? Some of its successes include the number of housing units it's helped facilitate in recent years, a total of 1,100 units. Up on the screen here, this is a project, the Marist at 111 South Church from 2018. The whole project includes 83 affordable senior housing units, and it's tied to the adaptive reuse project of the historic Marist College building. Flexibility that helped this development fit on this site included parking reductions, reduced setbacks, and adjustments to the required landscaping. And so just to point out, it's not just housing, but affordable housing that's been supported by the IID. All the projects in the IID add up to 250 affordable housing units. And that's about 16% of the housing that's been implemented, which is a number we'd all like to see increase as soon as possible. Another example of housing in the IID is the Flynn shown on the screen now. It was more recently completed in 2021, and it includes 243 market rate units, also adding to housing stock in the area. To receive flexible incentives, this project incorporated several historic resources on site, and in exchange was able to use parking reductions and setback reductions that are a reasonable match for an urban built environment. Then some very visible commercial projects include the hotels that have been built using the IID, including the Hilton dual brand hotel at 141 Stone. Similar incentives were used to develop this project, and it contributes to over 1 million square feet of commercial use developed using the IID. But something really important to emphasize is that the IID also supports smaller scale commercial businesses like Bacher Cider House on 4th Avenue. It's a historic building that used to hold a retail business. And so changing the use to a bar using the underlying zoning would require a larger number of parking spaces, more than might fit on the site without demolishing the historic building anyway. So the IID includes flexibility to reduce the parking needed on site to make a project like this viable in a location where walking, taking transit, using rideshare makes more sense for going out anyway. And then another way to consider the IID rather than lists of units and square footage, although that data is helpful and supportive, it's to consider the combination of all these projects in one area that can lead to a different environment, ideally one that's comfortable at the scale of people, connects to the identity of the area, even as updates are made. So this map zooms in on some of the clusters of these projects, where you can see that new housing density is next to amenities like the streetcar, even walkable access to retail, food, jobs, and entertainment options. It's a tricky thing to talk about, how a place changes over time, what those project numbers mean when a place changes, especially for people who know it well. But the IID is used in effort to preserve historical and recognizable components while allowing for reuse and much needed housing. So a street level view of that change is shown here. This is an image of Stone Avenue facing south at Broadway from 2011, over 10 years ago. So some features included one-story office buildings, other outdated buildings, and surface parking lots. And then an image from that corner today includes many more things in the same space, from multiple new housing units, reuse of the outdated office building, ground floor retail, medical resources, bike racks, and street trees, all within easy reach of the streetcar stop on Broadway. And speaking of the streetcar, ridership had been pretty steady up until 2020 when the pandemic hit. And then ridership nearly tripled in 2022, presumably influenced by the no fare policy. And during that time, it's seen the highest ridership numbers since it began in 2014. And then to connect it to the development downtown, according to census data before the pandemic, across the city of Tucson, 80% of people who work outside the home drive alone to work. But for those who work in central downtown and just northeast of downtown, that falls to slightly lower to 77 and 76%. That's because more bus and streetcar trips to jobs in the central core of downtown, and more bicycle trips to jobs that are located just outside that core. So there's currently more jobs than housing units in the downtown area, but the possibility of living and working closer to each other reduces both vehicle miles traveled and the feasibility of walking, biking, or using public transit. So some of the components of the IID that help incentivize urban transit-friendly development. One component is how building designs have to provide a transition between denser, taller buildings and lower density neighborhoods. The requirements here are to step down heights over 25 feet to single family residences, and requirements to break up massing so facades are less imposing. There's also privacy increase through window and balcony placement, buffers and screening via landscaping. And what's shown here is a reference diagram, but also a real life example at East 5th and North 7th, the 7th Avenue Commons, where newer apartment buildings step back from the street across from single family homes that are 1 story tall. And then historic preservation is a key part of the IID, especially in regards to that placemaking consideration. The incentives provided by the IID require maintaining listed historic properties. And in fact, the flexibility allowed by it, those standards make it more likely for a project to be able to adapt and reuse existing buildings, because the current underlying standards for parking, for setbacks, they're from a different era. They're focused on a more suburban style development that the older buildings and sites just can't match. And then in terms of housing, a key directive established in 2019, the same one that set the current sunset date, was to complete a local housing study. So the Housing Affordability Strategy for Tucson, or HAST report, was produced by the city's Housing and Community Development Department and adopted by Mayor and Council last year. So besides laying out current housing trends and challenges, it includes policy directives, of which one points to incorporating affordable housing incentives into overlay zoning on transit corridors, which is perfect timing to consider in this update to the IID. So that's a lot of background on the IID, what's it supported so far, and other recent context that leads into the update. As I mentioned, Mayor and Council initiated this review and outreach process in February, and staff have been sharing this background, current research, and asking for comment and feedback in a number of formats and settings. The spring, we linked up with Tucson Norte Sur, the Equitable Transit-Oriented Development, and their outreach efforts with surveys and information in parks and at Cyclovia. We have given a range of presentations to commissions and review boards who have roles in the IID review process. In April, we hosted an online stakeholder session to help focus on specific goals. And those were further refined through focus groups with specific experiences with the IID. So online and in-person public meetings followed that just in October, in addition to neighborhood meetings that staff joined to discuss specific areas where boundary expansions have been proposed. And of course, we presented this material to Planning Commission study session just last month. So feedback from early surveys and outreach included mixed impressions of downtown and changes that people have seen over the years. Themes that people would like to see continued or even increased included bike routes and walkable environments, historic character and Tucson identity, support for local businesses, affordable housing, and overall affordability. And then themes to prevent or discourage included car-centric environments, cost and gentrification, and a generic modern built environment. And listening sessions in April matched and formalized some of these themes, and then further refined through focus groups. Those key areas included minor adjustments to the IID boundaries, some edges that are affected by but can't take advantage of the IID standards, also consolidating or streamlining different processes involved in that review, challenges in terms of first floor retail requirements came up in these discussions, a focus on affordable housing and getting that balance correct, as well as parking and how that plays into the review process, and a look at design standards for the different areas. And then most recently from last month's study session, comments received that we'll address through details in the proposal tonight include how the IID complements transit-oriented development, more details on those privacy standards, effects on gentrification, and some text adjustments. Also clarification on affordable housing, parking and landscaping, as well as adjustments to the ground floor retail, and more information on the boundary changes. We've also compiled a IID FAQs that's posted on the project webpage, and it's been part of tonight's public hearing materials. So that's available for review. So this background and comments has led into the proposals, and I'll hand the presentation back to Dan to go over.
Great, thanks, Keisha, appreciate it. So the proposal in front of you and is a part of your materials has really 7 components to it. That it starts off with an integrated parking plan integration. There are some changes to design standards for downtown links and Stone Avenue corridor. Some minor cleanups and clarifications that have come about through, just the implementation of the code and putting in those regulations. There's a portion related to residential uses in industrial zones, affordable housing incentive, some minor boundary changes, and then ultimately the sunset date, which is really the reason why we're here, looking at the infill incentive district code. Go into a little bit of detail on each of those for this. So the individual parking plan integration. So this is one that came out of our discussions in our focus groups. Was really, there's all the different layers within the infill incentive district and the different review processes. Are there areas to where we can actually consolidate some of those? So currently with the infill incentive district, the individual parking plan, or an IPP, is a separate process to reduce parking requirements that run concurrently with the IID review. The proposed change would basically just amend section 512.8 And then clarify that the review and approval would be done via the IID review. Instead of two separate approvals, it just becomes a part of the kind of general waiver process and the approval that we have for the full project. The applicant still needs to provide a parking study and show how they meet their parking needs. Just kind of related to this, that this is not a by right reduction compared to just parking and what the underlying zoning is. It does have things that help protect the areas around it. So it's required to meet findings that they will mitigate the impact on surrounding properties. It's required to have a parking study, as I mentioned there, that shows why the reduction makes sense, how they're going to park it. And then there's also public notification. So not only is there a neighborhood meeting that's required for the IID project, but there's a neighborhood meeting that's required for the individual parking plan. And so if there are concerns of the surrounding neighbors or properties, they can be addressed via site-specific conditions and become a part of that process and a part of that feedback. So that's the first proposal. Second one's related to design standards and minor tweaks. Related to this, there are some minor changes such as privacy standards for adjacent properties with the same ownership. Again, it's when you have one property that's owned by the same person, but on the separate side, opposite sides of the street. Orientation of buildings to be reflective of the process with transportation projects. So you'll see, and I'm going to go through some of these little changes to diagrams that we've made in order to kind of clarify some of those things. Guidance for temporary parking for phase projects. This is something that we really weren't anticipating, so there's some guidance in there related to that. And then some clarifications and minor tweaks. So uses that encourage street level activation and not limited to commercial or retail trade. We know there have been comments about vacant storefronts, but also, the concern about, that there's a need for grocery stores or pharmacies and things downtown. I will say related to at least the grocery stores and pharmacies, and we heard those comments. We have those companies and business models have very strict algorithms or criteria needed for location. And it's really based on rooftops and purchasing power. So while the IID allows for the flexibility to potentially locate those in the downtown area or in this area, it's really the increase in housing and increase in rooftops that would allow for those kind of formulas to work. So the IID does support that. It's just a matter of making sure that the conditions are right for it to occur. There was a minor clarification on shade coverage, that it's measured at 12 p.m. instead of 2 p.m. And then use tables have been consolidated for easier reference. And Commissioner Martin had mentioned in the last meeting, the title on one of the use tables was from the previous section. So we went through and made a change to that in the materials in front of you. So some of the additions, there were a few additions that came through between the last study session and this one to the red lines. And they really came through in the form of kind of some minor adjustments made to the design diagrams. One is in 51212B, the Toole Avenue area. And then the second one is along the Stone and 6th area. And that's really related to the bulk kind of changing related to the roadway project, but it's also related to the expansion of the boundary changes that we are proposing along Stone Avenue. So the first one here is it's related to section 51212B. Go back. There we go. Toole Avenue area. This is figure 512 EPSB. If you look at this, the changes that are in front of you are really related to the alley portion here. So I'll just kind of orient you. So this is Stone Avenue. This is Council Street. The Pima County Courthouse is off to the east here. And actually my office is right here. This is the Pima County Public Works building that's here. Toole Avenue hold on. That's the railroad. This is Franklin, and then that turns into Toole as you come down here. So it's downtown. So on the previous diagram, there were some kind of strange things going on. This middle section right here had no height labeled on it, and it was labeled as HBZ, which it is not. But also there were no transitions from this portion, which is the most intense portion. It's the 10-story, 120 foot. It transitions straight to just 2 stories, 30 feet. Looking at this area, it's already a really intense underlying zoning. So it's OCR2 on the east side and it's C3 on the west side. So it's 300, it's allowed the underlying zoning 300 feet right here, pretty much on this whole block, and then 75 feet on this whole block. So what we are proposing is basically just instead of a 10-story to 2-story transition, it would be more of a gradual transition here. So kind of fixing this portion and then putting a 2-story height limit on this middle portion where for some reason there was really no height that was listed there. It was very confusing. It was 1 over HPZ and there's no HPZ there. So anyways, it was I think it was just an error, an omission at that time. So that's the first one that we are looking at as far as just kind of clarifying and setting that up there. The second one, so this is the west side of Stone between 6th Avenue and Speedway. And these kind of go in order from north to south. So this is Stone and Speedway here. This is first between 1st and 2nd, 2nd and University, University and 4th, 4th and 5th, 5th and south of there. So previously it was kind of an odd combination of specific and generic blocks. So some of them were specific, some of them were generic. What we ended up doing here was just being specific for each of them as they came through. Just to notice on here, the bulk reduction and the step backs. So the 2 stories that that basically are next to the existing areas match what the R2 zoning and underlying zoning allow for those. So all of these have 2-story, 25 feet along this west portion as you get over here, and then load the intensity along Stone in order to kind of protect the situation along those areas. The second one is, again, just the reorganization of these. There's nothing new that's really being proposed here, but just being more clear as far as how those diagrams go. And this runs, again, really from north to south. So 1st to 2nd here, 2nd to University, University to 4th, 4th to 5th, and then south of 5th. And then here is kind of the building section showing that transition that goes from Stone Avenue, essentially, back down into the existing neighborhoods that are there and showing that kind of step back for that. So those were the updates, really clarifying those sections, making it easier to understand for those. There was a little bit of confusion related to that. So those are the diagrams you'll see that have changed a little bit from last time. Additionally, so we are looking at kind of an approach on affordable housing as well as increasing housing supply. So the main crux of this is really allowing residential development on industrial zone land within the greater infill incentive subdistrict and the downtown core subdistrict. So ultimately, previously we only allowed for residential to be developed in industrial zones within the downtown links. This is kind of an extension of that policy. I think it was intended to do so previously. It just wasn't very clear. So making it very clear that you can do that. We go through and then we set baseline densities for building heights and market rate housing. And they're proposed depending on the scale of development in those subdistricts. And then you incentivize the affordable housing through density and building height bonuses for those subdistricts. Just to point out, the amount of industrial land that there is within the infill incentive district, there's quite a bit. Quite a bit already in the downtown links here, but there's 27.5% of land within the greater infill incentive subdistrict. So you'll see a lot of it in the north, up here along Stone and then west of Oracle, as well as quite a bit to the south along kind of the freeway area down over here. There is a bit in the downtown core, not as much, but still 17.7 in the downtown core of land that currently doesn't allow for residential development that we would be opening up to residential development to help with some of those supply issues that we're currently having within development. So taking that, basically what we do is set that baseline density for market rate housing in industrial zones. So in the greater infill incentive district, R3 zone property would be allowed a density, or it would be allowed a density of R3 zone property, so 36 units per acre. If it's in the downtown core, be the equivalent of the C3 zone, which is 87 units per acre. Downtown core is a more intense zone. That's the reason why we would do that. We also set maximum building heights within the greater infill incentive subdistrict, market rate housing would be capped at 35 feet, while the height would be the same as the rest of the downtown core for those residential and industrial for 60 feet. So setting those baselines for market rate, and then incentivizing the affordable housing through basically the removal of the residential density caps. These are for incentive for projects with 15% affordable units or more. It would be the removal of residential density caps, and then building heights would be allowed for 75 feet, so 60 feet to 75 feet within downtown core, about 2 more stories, and then 35 feet to 60 feet within the greater infill center subdistrict. One other thing that we have noticed is that a lot of projects have struggled with the amount of time it takes to get an approval for any of our overlays, really. Infill incentive district, our Grant Road overlay, Sunshine Mile. So we have drafted in a pre-approval process that would allow for affordable housing projects to get that pre-approval of their zoning so that they can apply for 100% affordable units with the LIHTC grants, which are low-income housing tax credits. So this hopefully will open that up, create this kind of HOV lane for affordable housing projects. I do want to mention that, and I know it may not be super clear, there was a question that we received related to HPZs and whether the density, it would remove the density caps or building heights for HPZs. Those are mandatory overlays. So it would still have to adhere to all of the standards of the HPZ. So this would not this wouldn't apply to that. Just to kind of let you know kind of what it is as far as eligibility and how that would work. Affordable for this, it's affordable at the as far as the kind of the federal standard goes. Affordable is defined as 80% or less of the area median income, where housing costs do not exceed 30% of family's income. So this is our proposal. It's modeled after what we've done for the Sunshine Mile overlay, where we've also done similar things where we've removed density caps for those affordable projects. We have had some concerns that 15% may too low. It's not going to really address, it may not address the true need. I do want to mention this is just one tool of many. We're going to be, as Keisha brought up with the HASC plan, there are a lot of other initiatives in there that we will be working on that will hopefully also address this type of thing. And it's really a balancing act. What we've seen in other communities is around 10 or 15% is enough that the market will actually utilize it and utilize this tool. You require too much, they won't utilize the tool and you won't have any affordable housing. So we're just trying to find that balance related to this. And this is kind of what we've done and what we've seen work elsewhere. So that's the affordable housing and residential piece. We have some IID boundary changes that we are recommending that are in our proposal. They're really minor tweaks to boundaries at edges to reduce kind of split parcels and then including commercially zoned areas. Congress Street commercial corridor, the former Nearmount landfill site, some commercially zoned property along Stone, Main and Dunbar Spring area, and then some vacant property that is near Tucson House and Barrio Blue Moon. There are some vacant lots, and I'll go through each of those. So the first one is the Congress Street corridor. These are C1 and C3 zones. There are several historic properties. As Acacia talked about earlier, there are these historic protections in the IID to where you can't modify a building to the point to where it affects its contributing status. So you can't delist a building. So it would help to encourage the reuse of those existing structures. And that's one of the reasons why it's being suggested here. We had several property owners and business owners come to us and suggest adding it to the IID for this portion. And this portion really is, it's the north part of Congress from Bonita all the way over to just west of Grande over here. And these little kind of maroon purplish outlines are historic buildings. So there are several historic buildings. If there were to be new development, there's still IID transitional standards and bulk reduction that the underlying zoning doesn't have. So you would end up potentially with more appropriate development if there were new development. And then the flexibility really allows for you to reuse those properties because they were developed at a time before our current zoning code. A lot of times it's very difficult for them to either have a change of use or have put an addition and meet the standards that are in our code, whether they're related to landscaping, whether they're related to parking. It makes it very challenging to where, sometimes a lot of, the only option they may have is to demolish the historic building and just build new instead of going through and having an adaptive reuse project. So that was the first one. Second one is the former near Mount Ranville. This is a property that is owned by the city of Tucson. A portion of it is outside of the IID, zoned R2, and it's kind of split the boundary. So if you see here that little outline, that is the full former near Mount landfill. This is a remediated landfill site. I want to clarify that this is not the Hay Mountain landfill site. That's a different site that's zoned R1. We're not making any changes to that. We also do understand that there are plans for a park and open space on this site. We don't really feel that this precludes that from being a part of it, but it does allow for more comprehensive site planning and development on the site when that does occur. It can be, so right now Menlo Park is working on their neighborhood plan that can help to shape what happens there by those goals that are established via it. And it really does, the IID does have requirements for open space, which could be a part of that, which would have to be a part of that. But it would provide that flexibility so you could really be able to shift and move things around so it functions as a better site as a whole. So that is the reason why we are looking at this related to it, potentially adding this as a site. Third one that we're looking at are commercially zoned properties along Stone and Main. These are C3 properties, so they're intense zoning. They allow for feet. I'm gonna switch my ear pod here. Sorry about that. Several historic properties in these areas, and many of the parcels are split by the IID to where they're kind of running right down the middle. And you can see kind of some of these, like right here, kind of right in the middle of the Sahara, right along here on Stone and Speedway, where there's this big vacant lot. The IID kind of splits it in half. The goal here really is, one, to allow for more comprehensive planning of some of those sites, but there are also benefits to, especially on sites like C3 zone property, where you could go up to 75 feet potentially, that would allow for the reuse of some of those existing structures and historic structures, which there are several of them, both along Main, but also along Stone. IID does include transition standards and bulk reduction. That's not the case with the underlying zoning. So if there was an issue related to light trespass, or there was an issue related to, parking next to existing neighborhood or area, that could come out in the process because there is neighborhood notification, neighborhood meetings, and site-specific conditions could be added to that along with that existing transition standards. And then again, just that flexibility really allows for a change of use where the underlying zoning generally doesn't. Making historic structures, more challenging sites, easier to keep those historic structures there is with the opposite of that happening, potentially demolishing those buildings, or just no redevelopment happening and having vacant buildings. And then the last one are the vacant properties near the Tucson house. So these are some R2 zone properties that are located right here. They are vacant lots with single ownership. This has the potential it's a potential site for affordable housing to support the goals of the Thrive in the 05 neighborhood transformation plan. And then again, it includes transition standards and bulk reduction and flexibility to really utilize those sites properly if and when those get potentially utilized. So the single ownership extends, really it's these sites here, but then it extends down here, and it's all really the same ownership here. And then again, it's right next to Tucson House, so it's a good location potentially for that. So those are the 4 boundary changes that are being proposed in front of you for discussion. And then ultimately just the sunset date removal. We are recommending the removal of the sunset date. At this point, the IID has had a 10-year track record of facilitating new housing and development and supporting adaptive reuse. And really the type of development by the IID, it really helps to implement both transit-oriented development, infill, and long-term goals. And just related to that, you know, I know it has brought us back to look at this. And so I think there's good things, but mayor and council do have the ability to direct staff to evaluate this at any time. They could say, come back in 5 years and look at this. They could say, come, you know, if there's an issue, they could say 2 years from now, say, we need to look at this again, and then direct us to do so. So it doesn't, if we remove the sunset date, it doesn't preclude us from having that direction or coming back and making any future changes. So with that, staff recommends the Planning Commission approval motion to recommend approval of the proposed infill incentive district updates, UDC text amendment, and removal of the sunset date to mayor and council. And we're happy to answer any questions now or after the public hearing.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to open this up for any questions by the commissioners. I see Mr. Commissioner McKenzie's hands up first.
Thank you. Other than the figure of the 76 to 77% of people downtown who now commute by individual car, which is a few percentage points less than the 80% figure quoted elsewhere, is there a 10-year track record of the IID, you know, helping to avoid car-centric environments, which, you know, appears to be one of the primary goals of this, and also a part of several public comments?
Yes, Commissioner McKenzie, I mean, I think there's that. There's also the increase in ridership along the streetcar that has occurred. If you look at the amount of units that have gone in, and then how it has supported the increased use of the streetcar, that's another kind of metric that you could potentially use to point to that. You know, those are
not
really...
if the streetcar, that the streetcar was free. I mean, that's what increased the ridership, wouldn't you say? I mean, can you break out what, you know, increase in ridership can be attributed to some of these IID developments?
I mean, I don't believe we have that data as far as specifically attributed to those IID developments. We do have IID developments that are required to hand out or provide parking pass, or not parking passes, sorry, like streetcar passes and things of that sort to their residents. Of course, at this point, it's free. It's not really probably helping with that type of thing. But really, ultimately, the goal of having, you know, residences and work near transit, which is what the IID helps to have happen. Without the infill incentive district, very little development can occur or did occur in downtown until 10 years ago. But related to that, I mean, the things we can look at are ridership, and we can look at, again, what Keisha had pointed to from the PIVO study that we had talked about.
Okay. I have a quick second question. I looked at all the public comments on this IID proposal, and the vast majority of them, if not all of them, seem to have come from, you know, relatively small parcels that are, you know, down there by the Mercado and what is it, the Dunbar Spring neighborhood. But there's no public comments on all those big swaths of, you know, of potential development areas. And I was just curious why the concentration on the very small areas.
Commissioner McKenzie, I think this is pure speculation. I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I think it has to do really with the changes that we are proposing, I think, right now. So a lot of the stuff in really the downtown area and stuff and changes, there aren't major changes to whatever the regulations where a lot of those large development parcels are. We're making changes on the boundaries to areas where those smaller parcels are, with people that have come to us and requested to, you know, potentially bring those in. And I think that's why you're seeing those comments. It's related to the boundary changes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zagier?
Yeah, thanks. So I've got two questions. My first question is for, forgive me, Miss Dupre. Is that correct? I can't.
Dupierre, yeah, that's fine.
Dupierre, okay. So you listed the projects numbers. So you had the downtown core 14, the greater infill, what do you call it? Greater infill section sub-district is 11, and then the downtown links at 27, which is 52. So, and you said half it was like smaller, it says smaller or minor projects. So of those 52 projects, given that I know that some of them are residential versus commercial, maybe developments, is of those 52 projects in those 3 sub-districts of the IID, how many of those were residential projects? And of those residential projects, what's the percentage of affordability? Did that make any sense?
Sure, I can start breaking down the numbers for you. Of the 52, there's a total of 18 residential projects.
Okay.
11 of those are mixed use, so residential and likely ground floor retail, and then 7 that are fully multifamily.
Okay.
But as far as the affordable units, I don't have that broken out by project for you quickly, but there are a total of 1,120 units.
Okay.
And then 250 of those are affordable. So that's 16%.
Okay. All right. All right. That's where I kind of got lost on your presentation, but I appreciate you breaking that down for me. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Second question is, and has to do with part of what Commissioner McKenzie was talking. So reading the comments from the folks, this is in the Menlo Park area. I guess they call it, is it Nearmont, where the dump used to be?
Yes.
A lot of people have expressed a lot of interest of having a park there, and there are no parks in the general area, especially if you're calling walking distance, especially with the new condos and stuff they've built right just to the north of there, and the dwelling units that are in the Tucson, and it's not the Tucson house. Oh, I can't remember the large building across the empty lot that has apartments in it. But there's a real need to have a park in that available, some green space with trees, just a little bit. And I'm kind of leaning towards, maybe as far as when you expand this, is maybe something to bring towards mayor and council, that this is put into it, that a portion of this area close to the residential, older residential area is actually designated as a park, for the residents of the area. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Are there any other commissioners that have questions of staff? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing to members of the public who'd like to speak to the item on the commission. Dan, is the list from 445 okay for this one, or 455? Or?
I believe that is the most up-to-date one for this one.
Once again, I ask everybody to be timely, and if you're repeating something somebody else said, we will have heard it. limit the time to 3 to 5 minutes, and you can give your name and address when you speak. We would like that. So the first speaker I have is Maurice Roberts.
Hi, my name is Maurice Roberts, and I live in Tucson. I am a board director of the Armory Park Neighborhood Association and the board director of the Armory Park Historic Zoning Advisory Board. I own a number of historic buildings in Armory Park. I also own a couple of suburban ranches in Northeast Tucson. I have lived in Tucson since 1987. I have a background. I have a background of living in New York and in Paris, France. I can recognize historic places when I see them. This is a paraphrase. I noticed that a number of years ago, there used to be a beautiful neighborhood downtown Tucson called the Barrio. And at some point, people decided that, you know, it did not really reflect the desires of the city, and they put up the Tucson Convention Center. They tore down a whole neighborhood, running over a cultural heritage that went back hundreds of years. And this is one of the reasons why I started buying historic buildings in Tucson, to protect them, to make sure that the Hispanic heritage, okay, the Tohono O'odham, Pasquayaki, wherever it is, okay, would continue into the future. Okay, we used to be Mexico. Let's not forget about it. Okay. I believe that the IID is a terrific tool. I think it really, really has excellent potentials. I also believe that it has to be handled with kids' gloves, because so much harm has already happened to this city. Okay, we need really to be very careful what we're going to give to our children and grandchildren. Now, I see in the Armory Park neighborhood, I know it does not really concern the particular areas that you've mentioned before with the Menlo Park and so on and so forth, but this is coming up at the same time, even though it hasn't been listed. There are some projects, whereas the city, to protect their investment into the Cruzillo, has decided to give favorite conditions to developers to develop in the IID on Stone Avenue, and to encroach on the HPZ in Armory Park in order to seal the deal. Okay, this is very dangerous. Okay, it amounts to, you know, putting an elephant in a china shop. Okay, Armory Park is a very fragile neighborhood. People have been obeying to historic standards for decades in order to preserve that neighborhood. And unfortunately, things are happening which are rendering this neighborhood extremely prone to a change in character. So what I would suggest is again, like I said, the IID, I think is a very good idea. Okay, we need housing, we need affordable housing. And by the way, the development which I'm referring to does not contain any affordable housing. No 10%, no 15%, it's all market rate. Okay, for some reason, again, like I said, you know, the city got pushed into this deal, okay, to a three-zone, you know, zoning change just to do something with the Cruzillo Church on 6th Avenue. So what you said about the IID, again, I think is very good, but I think it needs to have some teeth. There has to be some kind of enforcement mechanism attached to the whole IID process. Okay. IID projects need to be separated from any other projects. There cannot be any connections between an HPZ project and an IID project. Tucson is a beautiful town. People come here not to look at student housing, not to look at affordable housing building. They come for the history, which we have already destroyed so much of. So this is my reflection. That's about it. And I thank you for allowing me to speak. I love this city, and I hate when I see that sometimes we're just not going the right direction here. That's all.
I am muted.
Dan,
Sorry. Thank you. My next speaker is Michael Crawford. Not here, seeing anybody. The next speaker is Raul Ramirez. Next speaker I have is Allison Solomon.
Hold on, Raul just unmuted himself. So
Okay.
he's good.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Sorry, I was having problems, but first of all, I want to thank the commissioners for this opportunity to address, and also Commissioner Abariza for her comments related to a park area for Barrio Sin Nombre. I think for all, I don't know how well you know the area, assuming you're probably familiar with it, but the area that encompasses Barrio Sin Nombre in its past has had 3 landfills. One of them is the Nearmont, which has been mentioned. The other one is the Congress landfill, which really bordered the historic area of the Convento site. And the third is the A Mountain landfill. And the A Mountain landfill, for many of us on the west side, represents the birthplace of Tucson symbolically. It was there. And so Barrio Sin Nombre is kind of central to those 3 landfills. And those landfills were in operation for intervals of 10 years. I think the A Mountain closed in 63. I'm not so sure of the other ones, but around the same time. And they developed the landfills based on what was going on previously in terms of the brick making, the red bricks that were being real fashionable at one time in the 50s. And kind of it played out, other methods came into strength. But Barrio Sin Nombre, in my estimation, has suffered from disinvestment. And so it's only been recently that the neighborhood has been working with the Menlo Park Neighborhood Association. Because there's 3 neighborhoods that compose Menlo Park. It's Old Menlo Park, Barrio Sin Nombre, and the Mercado district. And Barrio Sin Nombre is probably the oldest. And been working with Menlo Park Neighborhood Association to develop a neighborhood plan. And there's been pretty good participation. And out of the neighborhood plan, and I did submit some information for you, the park is one of our priorities. So the park, the land that composes the park was part of a PH Hughes. That goes back in time, the subdivision back into the 20s, when some of the buildings were being built. We have some that are over 100 years old already in the neighborhood. And it was named after that, and it was included in that subdivision, and they're identified as lot 13 and 14. And right from the start, they were planned as residential. Unfortunately, then they became landfills as time went on. The area that we're talking about is 1.5 acres. If you look at lots 13, 1.5 acres. The total area that was shown to you comprising the Nearmont landfill, I believe it's 7 acres at least. The area of the Convento is probably 8 acres. And then the area that makes up the land, the birthplace, or the A Mountain landfill, is 28 acres.
each of those is kind of in the flux of development. So the city, and I agree with the city's intent to develop more affordable housing, but I don't think it's going to happen at 15%. And I was at one of the hearings that was held in Menlo Park, and there was a gentleman that represented a developer. He was even squawking that it was too much. 10% would be appropriate. Well, one of the things to me that's interesting is that the city owns that land. And so the city could have a different ratio than land that's outside the city, that's in private hands. So I think that ratio could be even higher, because we're not going to put a dent. The other thing too is that the acreage that we're talking about is not going to change the world in essence to meet the demand. So there's going to have to be a lot more work. But we really need to have open space in that area. I attached another exhibit, C, that shows the Mercado. So the Mercado is PAD, and they've been developing this under the Gadsden development. And if you look at the map, you can see the total number of either in place or planned. So currently they're starting to work on the Bautista, and I understand that they raised the number of units from 250 to 300. And the one that came online is the Monier. I think that was close to 200. Well, you have a senior center, Sentinel, and you have the West End, but they also plan an Abbey, and they plan they call the Lillian Grant row houses. So, but when all that is said and done, that's at least 1,000 units. Okay, so I'm not sure where. There's an open space, as I said, Mercado Centro, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be a parking area, multi-year. So,
Could I get you to wrap up your comments?
huh?
Could I get you to wrap up your comments?
Well, yeah, you can only. So what we're asking for is that part 2 be excluded from the proposed boundary changes. And we're in the process of also trying to set up several meetings. The neighborhood never voted on that. We never said to go with it. So, and all this time we've been working on a park, and it really blindsided us. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is, where are you? Allison Solomon. Allison still here? Next
No,
speaker.
I don't see her. No.
Is Mac Hudson. Next speaker I have is Kylie Walzak.
Hi there. Can everybody hear me okay? My name is Kylie Walzak. I live at 232 North Melrose Avenue in Menlo Park. Usually I watch Planning and Zoning Commission meetings for Pima County as part of my job. And unlike those meetings, which are 4 to 5 hours long and start in the morning, I don't take any pleasure in speaking tonight with a different perspective than some of my neighbors. Some of those county meetings get a little nasty, and I am here tonight really because I respect my neighbors and respect the work that they've done in Barrio Sin Nombre to reserve the area that's under consideration tonight for inclusion in the IID as a public park. I agree with that. I think it's needed. I'm not going to repeat the comments that I emailed to you earlier. I hope you all had a chance to read it. But I do just want to make a couple of other points that I think could add context to this discussion. let me back up a second, and I want to kind of address Commissioner Martin's comments too about, is the IID really meeting the transportation goals that it set out to meet? I first became aware of the IID expansion when in the Menlo Park neighborhood, we were presented with 2 new redevelopment plans for commercial properties that are on Congress and Grande that are being considered for inclusion into the IID. One is a parcel that's going to be purchased by an out-of-state business group that wants to start a cafe. The other is purchased by a local business group that also wants to start a cafe. And in Menlo Park, we are smack dab in the middle of our neighborhood plan process. And so we don't have anything binding or formally adopted to show you tonight what our priorities are. But we've done a lot of work on setting those priorities. And a lot of those priorities include reducing the impacts of traffic to our neighborhood, including high-speed traffic. And, you know, as planning commissioners, I know you all know the relationship between abundant parking and car dependency. You know, you're going to use your car to get to a hotspot destination if you know that there's plenty of places for you to cheaply and preferably freely park your car. If you start to make that more difficult by encouraging people to use the transit investment that we've all paid for, like the streetcar, or like better sidewalks and bike lanes that we have on the west side, then eventually it's going to become so much of a hassle to park your car in those high destinations that you're going to choose other options. So Commissioner Martin, you asked the question of, is using streetcar ridership the most effective way to measure if people are actually adopting other modes? I can just tell you anecdotally, and I know a lot of other people who
That
this
was
applies to.
Commissioner McCancy, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry, McCancy, Martin, sorry. I didn't see whose green screen was up, but thank you for the question. A lot of people don't use the streetcar because they find that biking is faster. So we're not measuring that, and we don't know the impact of that in downtown. So anyway, we reached out to these developers who were looking to redevelop these sites along Congress Street, told them about the IID, told them how it could help them develop their commercial space to be more people-centered rather than car parking storage, and they were interested in it. They looked at it. Some of them have written in letters of support for including Congress to that. But ultimately, they told us that the amount of additional time and public input, and including neighborhood meetings, was going to add a lot to their timeline for redevelopment, and they weren't interested in participating in the IID. However, they would like to participate in the IPP. So I just add that because I think it's important for you all to know that the additional time for neighborhoods to weigh in on the proposals and the requests for permissions adds to, it all adds up in the developer's mind. So take that into a consideration. Do with that what you will. I do think that in Menlo Park, we have an interesting neighborhood in that we want to see less parking. We want to see more people-oriented spaces. We want to see a reduction in traffic. Because we started that conversation with some of these developers, it led us to realize that the Nearmont landfill parcel was being drawn into the proposed expansion. So here we are tonight discussing, there's a lot of comment that I saw in your packet about including it in the IID or not. I will say this, that the neighborhood plan process and the neighbors of Menlo Park and Barrio Sin Nombre want to see a public park on that spot. We disagree that inclusion in the IID will impact that. I think that that's something for us to work out as a neighborhood. Again, we're in the middle of our plan. We're going to keep having a lot of discussions about that. But I do think that given the incentives for affordable housing, especially on a city-owned parcel that is located as close as it is to the streetcar and other biking and walking investments in our city, it makes a lot of sense for Menlo Park to be afforded the most amount of flexibility possible to be able to go through a community-driven, authentic, and process-oriented plan to be able to decide how that parcel looks. That makes everybody happy. And I do think that being included into the IID will help us all erase the arbitrary zoning lines that we see on your materials that show you the outline of the parcels being included in the IID. I think we need to get away from thinking about things in terms of lines on a map, especially in that parcel, because it is city owned and it's got so much potential for serving a lot of good. And I want to make sure that we have the tools that we can have to be able to have a discussion that honors what everybody needs and wants to see happen there. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker I have is Anthony Nelson.
Good afternoon or late evening. My name is Anthony Nelson. I live at 333 South Melwood Avenue in Barrio Sin Nombre. I'm 5th generation in this community. My kids are 6th generation. So what I want to say is the history of my neighborhood, and I don't think anybody could tell it better than I can, is a lot of injustice around our community. Growing up, there was no, pretty much this place was just people turned their heads to it. It was a bad community. There was no investment in this community whatsoever. Apparently now Menlo Park is a booming neighborhood, or number 5th, according to Mr. McClusker from Rio Nuevo. It's 5th on Forbes list of best places to be, I guess, as an investor. My outlook on the Nearmount landfill is my community. I'm out here speaking for a lot of people who are elder. They don't have access to the internet. They don't pretty much have time or the knowledge to reach out to you. We're opposing the IID in the Nearmount landfill. We're fine with it being on Congress. We feel as a community that we need a park there. It's time is due. We really don't understand why the IID is pushing into our small park. It's a family park. We're going to call it the birthplace of Tucson Park. I just want everybody to know that's listening is this is very small for some people. Somebody said that they've been in Tucson since 1987. I was born in 1987. I've lived in this community since 1987. There's no reason that we should not have a park there. I'm gonna go ahead and close with that. I wish everybody peace, love, and respect. I just want you guys to know that as far as the Barrio Sin Nombre goes, my community members in that community are opposed to your IID. And that's all I can say. Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person is Jonathan Crow.
Good evening. Thank you, Planning Commission, for this opportunity. My internet's a little sketchy, so if you can't hear me, we'll deal with it. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. So my name's Jonathan Crow. I'm a professional planner. I've been a professional planner for about 35 years. I've worked for Pima County in the transportation department as a planner for 25 years. And I've lived, but I'm speaking to you tonight as a member of the Dunbar Spring Neighborhood Association, where I've lived for about 25 years. So in general, I'm supportive of the infill district. I work with my position at the county to try to promote alternative transportation, more dense development, alternate modes, and more efficient designs. But where I think the infill district here, where I have some concerns about it, is with the proposed expansions into the Dunbar Spring neighborhood. Right now, the border is along Ash Avenue or Alley, which is a half block west of Stone, and I think that's an appropriate boundary. What's being proposed by staff now is the inclusion of several properties which continue all the way over to 9th Avenue. Some of those properties are already built, like the Sahara Apartments, which was built in the late 50s, the In Suites Motel up off First Street. So those are a given. Merle's Auto is also within that block, but there's also a number of historic properties along that block along that section, which are being proposed for inclusion into this district, which I don't think is appropriate. Now, staff has talked about the provisions for historic preservation, and I grant that there are some protections there, but that's not the intent of the infill district. The infill district, as we all know, is intended to encourage appropriate redevelopment and more dense development, which I'm supportive of. What I'm not supportive of is the conversion or the change of any impact to these historic properties. And these are single family homes built in 1920, which have been single family homes for over 100 years. They happen to be commercially zoned. That's what was done back in the day, but there's no intention for these homes to be redeveloped, and there's no intention with the owners to redevelop them. There's no room for any other redevelopment on their property because they're very small parcels. So it really doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to expand this district to include those 4 particular houses that I'm referring to along the Stone Avenue corridor, which are not going to be redeveloped and don't need any incentives for redevelopment. So I'm lobbying for those particular 4 properties to not be included in the infill district. Neighbors in my neighborhood also share concerns about the potential impacts to historic properties. Many of the houses in the neighborhood are over 100 years old, and we've lost a number of those along the edges to redevelopment over the years. Now, while I support redevelopment along Stone Avenue, Speedway, Fifth, I just, as I said, I'm not supportive of any changes to these particular 4 houses, and I can provide staff with the addresses on 1st Street, 2nd Street, and on 4th Street. Now, I lobbied before mayor and council when the infill district was originally developed in 2009, and again made my pitch to remove some of these historic properties, and the mayor and council was gracious enough to include some of those changes when they first established the infill district. So I'm hoping that they will do so again. I'm supportive of the infill district in general. I just think that the boundary changes that are being proposed today are not appropriate, and I hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to ask if anybody else in the audience would like to speak to the commission at this time. Have Colette raising her hand.
Yes, my name is Colette Altaffer. I live on Sierra Vista Drive. I serve on the board of the Body-Owned Neighborhood Coalition. And several days ago, we sent a letter to the Planning Commission, but when I checked the website twice today, I didn't see that letter among your materials. So I'm not sure if you even received it. In that letter, we pointed out that the IID and the Central Business District have almost identical boundaries, and they sit on top of each other. Our group has always been concerned about the gentrification and displacement that follow redevelopment. So we have been tracking both the IID and the Central Business District. Lately, I've been watching the redistricting meetings, and what is fascinating about them is who shows up from the community to speak. These are not the usual faces we typically see at other city meetings. This is particularly true for Ward 1. These residents come to speak very forcefully against the redevelopment that is creeping out of downtown toward their neighborhoods. They do not see themselves benefiting from this high-priced development, and they acknowledge that they cannot afford the goods and services that it brings. But they also lament the loss of community as their long-term neighbors are priced out of the ward. This did not have to happen. In 2012, when the city first created the Central Business District, there was a statutory requirement that they also had to create a redevelopment area plan. It was to be written with the input from the affected residents. Had it been done correctly, it could have contained tools to help counter the forces that lead to gentrification. Instead, the city ignored the statute, and that plan was never written. Now, if you look at the staff memos that were written in 2012, there's a kind of verbal wink, wink, nudge, nudge, where the staff informed the mayor and council that the statute contains no deadline for creating that plan. I'm not a lawyer, but I'd lay you odds that if this ended up in a court of law, The judge would throw the book at the city for allowing 10 years to pass without complying with the state statute. Sadly, when the city fails its citizens, it falls on groups such as yours to try and keep gentrification from getting worse. That is why the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition is asking you to allow the IID to sunset. It is meant to work in tandem with the Central Business District, so it too contributes to gentrification. We also question if it can still meet the statutory requirements that allowed for its creation in the first place. If equity matters to you, the IID is not the tool to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is John Burr.
Hello, Vice Commissioner Martin and other commissioners. My name is John Burr. I live in Armory Park. I'm on the ABNA board. I'm on the Historic Zone Advisory Board, and I'm also on the IID Design Review Committee. And along with Mr. Martin, we helped write the big whopping draft back in 2015 with thousands of hours of things. I'm really gratified that this is kind of a simple version, and I'm also gratified that Dan has been so available over the last 9 months on all of this. It's actually a pretty small revision. My concerns specifically, I guess, are about the merging in of the IPP process with the design review process. In some ways, it's good because it adds another layer of public review before IPPs are granted, before they go directly to the planning director. But the whole problem is the IPP process itself is flawed. There are 5 projects currently at 5 points where the same 275 spaces have been allocated to all 5 projects. And there's no tracking mechanism within PDSD for IPP tracking to make sure that when all 5 projects come online at the same time, that the users currently of those parking spaces don't all get dumped and create impacts into neighborhoods. And so I'm also wondering how an appeal process might work if it is merged within it. So I urge you to take a little tighter look at that merging as you make your recommendations for mayor and council. I too am also concerned about the sunset date. It's effectively been the only metric to update and revise. I've been to 9 meetings on this since February, and the stakeholder meetings, especially in September and October, were pretty helpful. And there's a lot more that really could be done to tweak this to kind of contain the problems that have arisen with development proposals over the years that I still think need to be addressed. So originally, a sunset was put in so that it does not become a by right option, but it is de facto a by right option because underlying zoning is so horrific, nobody ever developed anything with it before. So unless there is a metric to review and see if it's still a needed overlay or it needs to be revised or the map needs to change substantially because certain areas like downtown have already been redeveloped and the focus needs to be in certain parts of the greater infill incentive district or some other areas in the future, I think some metric needs to be put in, even if you do recommend to get rid of the sunset date technically. I think that's about it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Joe Adino.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Mr. Burr for bringing up some good points about parking and the sunset date there, as he always does. I wanted to read you a couple things. I also was concerned that the letter from the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition was not part of the addenda for this meeting. The bulk of that letter was quoting from the study presented by Gary Pivo to the mayor and council last year regarding the area that makes up the central business district and the infill incentive district. And I'd like to read those so we know what we're approving here and we know what the impacts of these policies are. First, gentrification, as indicated by gains in number of households earning more than $50,000 per year, occurred in 74% of the block groups around the central business district. Number two, in Census Tract 10, including parts of Barrio Viejo and Santa Rosa, Hispanics fell from 61 to 42%, while non-Hispanic white residents grew from 26 to 40%. Three, projects in culturally diverse neighborhoods need to be considered quite carefully, finding ways to foster cultural preservation, shops, homes, and jobs for those already there. Four, legacy small and locally owned businesses is not adequately tracked in Tucson, but evidence suggests that they are doing more poorly in parts of the CBD than in other parts of the city or county. Evidence also suggests they are probably being harmed by the loss of customers being displaced by the loss of lower priced rental housing. Five, if long-term residents can no longer identify with their neighborhood, they lose attachment to place and leave, hastening the conversion to homogeneous enclaves instead of integrated mixed-income neighborhoods. This means just as it is important to preserve affordable housing to prevent residential displacement, maintaining the political equity and power balances between long-standing and new residents in transitioning neighborhoods might be important to ensuring that long-term residents benefit and thrive as the neighborhood revitalizes around them. Again, those are all quotes from Dr. Paivo, the city's selected expert on displacement and gentrification in this area. I wanted to give you one other quote. It's from a paper from December, and it kind of reflects how these zoning modifications function in other cities as well. The paper is by Dr. Winifred Curran. It was in the International Journal of Urban and Regional Research. Dr. Curran is faculty professor of geography and sustainable urban development at DePaul. And what they said in the paper was the use of transit-oriented development upzonings in Chicago in 2013 and 15 have only exacerbated inequality. These ordinances allowed for additional units, minimized parking in area with a certain distance of a transit stop, and included a 10% affordability requirement in developments over 10 units. They were designed, as an alderman put it, to entice development in close distance to our train stations and bring in more revenue for the city and provide residents with more places to live, work, and enjoy the city of Chicago. A recent study on how TOD upzonings affected housing prices found that short-term impacts of the upzonings were higher property prices, even without any additional housing construction. The more expansive the upzoning, the larger the property value increases were. Upzonings increase land value, and they do so quickly. Rather than opening up possibilities for affordability, as many YIMBYs argue greater density allows, the Chicago experience indicates that these upzonings act as fuel for the speculative real estate market. Meanwhile, developers could opt out of building affordable units by paying into a housing fund. These funds often resulted in units that were too small for families and were in low-income neighborhoods, thereby furthering the city's segregation, end quote. So that's what we're voting on here. And I believe the best course of action would be to allow the IID to sunset. If the city does wish to produce future zoning updates, overlays, or incentives, they must be designed specifically with the maintenance and creation of low-income housing and increased housing affordability, which cannot be done by merely adding more of the market rate housing projects that have proliferated in this current area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is Karen Torres.
Hello and good evening. I thank you for letting me speak tonight. I just want to echo a lot of what the people have been saying. I agree to everything they're saying. But I also want to mention that I live in Barrio Sin Nombre. My kids are 6th generation. In Barrio Sin Nombre, our home is about 100 years old or over 100 years old. And I just want to echo that our community does not want this IID or this boundary change, at least. We don't see it fit for our neighborhood that is designed for, in our mind, is what is a park. And our neighborhood is owed from the city. we are in need of some restorative justice in our barrio. So I just want to echo tonight that I do approve for the sunset date to come and go.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is Mac.
Yes, that's Mac Hudson. I am a 22-year resident of Menlo Park, and I want to thank the commissioners, and I want to thank staff for all the time and effort they've put into this. I am in support of the IID. I am in support of, as indicated by staff, and I have sent in written comments to such. I won't repeat those, but I would like to see a greater than 15% requirement for the affordable housing incentive. That's the only change I would make to the staff's recommendations. I'm going to speak specifically to the two boundary extensions in Menlo Park, and I just want to say with Commissioner Marcanzi that his question of why the small areas have more comments, and the reason is because Menlo Park and Armory Park and Dunbar Spring are very active neighborhood associations. So it's an indication of people that care about their neighborhoods and that they participate. And as far as what Commissioner Briza talked about the park, I would recommend that the commissioners look at the comments that were submitted, the written comments, and you'll see that a majority, if not all of residents are in favor of a park, and I would say most in favor of affordable housing. And a majority of those that are in favor of the park are also in favor of the IID. And you'll see that in the written comments. I think that evidence speaks for itself. And the reason is because the IID will help with planning the park, help with planning the affordable housing together. So it will, right now under the existing R2 zoning that's there, there's no protection for the neighbor, there's no notice for the neighborhood meetings. There's, if you don't include the entire site, you can't allow for comprehensive planning. Also the bulk reduction and the transition to the neighborhood, that is not under the existing zoning. So Barrio Sin Nombre residents right now, they have no protection for transition zone to their neighborhood. They have no protection for, with the underlying zoning. The IID will actually help Barrio Sin Nombre avoid a bulk and density and height right next to their neighborhood. So it's a benefit to Barrio Sin Nombre. It's a benefit to the Menlo Park Neighborhood Association. And the last point I'd like to make is that that site will be planned in the future. What's happening right now is the vote on the IID. And I strongly encourage the commissioners to vote to approve this to Mayor and Council. The planning for that site will go on for months, maybe years, about what actually will happen there. But without the IID, we won't have the flexibility, we won't have the comprehensive planning, we won't have the protections of the neighborhood, we won't have the requirement of a neighborhood meeting. It's strongly a benefit to the whole neighborhood and the neighborhood that's adjacent. So also in regards to the Congress Street commercial zone, several neighbors with me have gone to every single property owner within the commercial district, and every single property owner is either strongly in favor, sent you comments saying such, and I know of no property owner or neighbor that's opposed to the Congress Street corridor extension. So that is those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Public hearing? See no one, I'd like to get a motion to close the public hearing.
I motion to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Okay, public hearing is closed. Any commissioners have any general discussion about the item before we make a motion? Commissioner Cassidy.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martin. Question for Dan. We've heard from a few residents that they're concerned about how the
expansion of the IID district would affect the park in Barrio Sin Nombre. How do you respond to that? Does the IID affect the ability to put a park there?
Yeah, Commissioner Cassidy, thanks for the question. Yeah, so the way we're looking at it is that it allows for a more comprehensive use and planning of that site, but it doesn't preclude them from putting a park on that site. So mayor and council can provide direction to put a park on that site. It can be a part of it, but it would allow for a more seamless planning of that entire portion instead of just having the R2 portion having kind of that weird boundary in the middle and then it being two separate sites almost.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Yeah, thanks. A couple clarifying questions. The first one, so yeah, we're hearing from folks with concern about how the IID might be leveraged on these potentially newly included parcels. Can you, Dan, or staff clarify the process of neighborhood input exactly that is required before any development decisions would be made on any of these parcels? Should they be included in the IID versus what that process might be as they're currently zoned, like before a decision was made? And then I have another question of that.
There we go. Okay, sorry, hit the wrong button. Yes, of course, thank you, Commissioner Schwartz. So there is a public process related to the IID. Essentially, they would be required to have a neighborhood meeting, depending on the, I guess, the scale of the project, whether it's a minor or a major project. It could be 100 feet, all property owners within 100 feet in the neighborhood association, or all property owners within 400 feet in the neighborhood associations within a mile. Would be invited to a neighborhood meeting. They'd be able to see the proposal, comment on it, and then there would also be, if on the larger projects, there would be a design review committee meeting as well that would be public. The underlying zoning does not have any of that, unless they were going through and doing a rezoning or some sort of required special exception like we were talking about earlier. So it has a much more public process that they would have to go through if they were to utilize the infill incentive district.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that. And then my other question is, I believe the number is 15% affordable housing mandate. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but where does that come from exactly? And, you know, is there wiggle room there? Could we be doing more to ensure that more affordable housing was being built with this plan?
Yeah, so so the 15% is basically what we had done on the Sunshine Mile. So that came out of that full process. And that's based off of kind of what we've seen in other communities and what has been utilized in other communities. Again, this is, you know, obviously you're welcome to make a recommendation to mayor and council to make any changes to any of these things. We were trying to find a balance, again, certain enough to where it'll be utilized so you get the affordable housing. If you require too much, then you may not. So there was also, just to kind of let you know kind of how we got some of the numbers related to the building height and density. And then also that 15% is that we did have a study, a market study done on affordable housing, and they found the sweet spot was for building height was between 3 and 4 stories. So 35 feet is where the market rate was. And if you increase it to allow for 4 or 5 stories, that's where it becomes affordable or it becomes, I guess, what is it? It provides enough of a return for a developer to actually utilize that and provide that affordable housing. And that's in a situation to where 15% was set up. So that's kind of where all that comes from. It's based on several different kind of sources, but that's why we have included it in our proposal.
Next, Commissioner Young.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Martin. You know, I think ultimately I do support the IID, and really I think for me what we're doing here is amending it. We're not saying, you know, voting to have it or not have it. I do understand that, you know, we would be getting rid of the sunset clause, but, you know, I do think, as it's been noted, mayor and council can do away with this if they want to, whether there's a sunset clause or not. You know, I think the gentrification and displacement has been brought up, and it's something that's of concern to me. And, you know, while I do think that the IID in a lot of ways does a lot of positive things to create a more urban environment that I think is good for many reasons, making communities more walkable, more pedestrian friendly, just people scale. It addresses issues of climate change. So, you know, I think a lot of those things are good, but I think, you know, just the city of Tucson over the years has fallen short of balancing that with policies that address gentrification and displacement and try and put the brakes on that. And unfortunately, I don't know, you know, how we as a planning commission can address that, but I do think it's a problem just kind of worth repeating that, you know, while we do have these tools like the IID that do bring benefits, I think, you know, the city does need to strike a balance and address gentrification and keep displacement from happening that Joe Albino mentioned is demonstrably happening in neighborhoods throughout Tucson. So I think that I just wanted to point that out. I'm not sure how as the planning commission, you know, we can address it here, but I do think it's important. And I guess I do have a question that a couple of other folks have touched on. Under the current zoning near Barrio Sin Nombre, where the park has been discussed, under the current zoning as things stand now, is it possible to put a park there?
Yes, Commissioner Young. Yeah, it's zoned R2. You could put a park on R2 property.
And so does my understanding is that, does the city own that particular parcel, or who owns that parcel? The city does. So I guess I'm just, you know, struggling with, I understand that there's a possibility, or that there is more comprehensive planning potentially that's required if that parcel is brought into the IID. But I'm also, I guess I'm also just trying to square that with, well, you know, if the neighborhood does want a park and that's something that's being explored, and that could happen, you know, with the current zoning, you know, I don't know how to square that. You know, it sounds like maybe the argument is that under the IID, the process for getting a park there would be more robust, and that would essentially be better. But I'm also struggling with the fact that, well, you know, the neighborhood's saying they want a park, at least some folks are, and it could potentially be done now. So I don't know, Dan, I don't know that I have a question there exactly that you haven't already answered, but is there anything I'm missing in kind of comparing the two processes, or what could happen there now versus the IID that you haven't already covered? You know, I certainly don't want to repeat yourself, but is there anything else there that we're kind of missing as a commission?
I think the only thing that Commissioner Young, so the only thing that I can kind of think of related to that would just be a more seamless integration with whatever gets developed on the other portion, to where you can be more creative with your design solutions and design that goes on with that. So if, as it is now, there's that cut line with the R2 property versus the industrial that's already in the overlay. And that's what you would have, right? This just allows for you to be more creative in the future.
I think the IID has a limit of 10%.
Excuse me.
And the other
Excuse me, the public
is not
hearing is
enough in
closed.
terms of acre and a half. So I'm clarifying, that's all.
Public hearing is closed. It's just the commissioners that are speaking now.
Well, just
There
clarifying.
Yes,
thank you.
Raul. So there is also a requirement for at least 10% of development or whatever to be open space within the IID. So there is that requirement that would be in the IID that isn't for the underlying zoning. But yeah, that's
okay. Yeah, no, that is good to know, because it does clarify, at least to a certain extent, that, you know, if that parcel comes under the IID, at least, you know, 10% would have to be open space. So I appreciate that. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a comment. This is just an option for development. The underlying zone can still be used. It's just, this is just an option to have different ways to plan your site. Is that a correct way to state it, Dan? Sorry.
Yes, that's true. Infill incentive district for the whole thing is an optional overlay, so you can still utilize the existing underlying zoning for any of the properties.
It doesn't make you follow the IID. It gives you the option to use it if you feel that it's an incentive to use it. So, Commissioner McKenzie.
Thank you. Again, gonna, for probably a long while, preface all my comments by saying I'm new to all this, but I guess I don't know if it's practical at this late stage with this IID language and changes and whatever, but I would like to see the the provisions for actual transit oriented development and sort of better sort of requirements and provisions for increasing mass transit use and reducing car centricity, sort of incorporated into the into the IID, as well as maybe some more innovative concepts being used in all kinds of other cities, which are car-free block, several block areas, together with more green space, like the park that they're that they're talking about in Barrio Sin Nombre, and just greater efforts and energy to reduce at least fossil-driven car-centric situations in development.
Thank you, Commissioner Zagier.
Yeah, I have a question. Question about the sunset date. Okay, so this was set up a sunset date for 10 years down the road to reevaluate this. And basically, do we keep the IID or do we just stop doing it? I think I'm correct on that. So as some people have commented that we should just basically just get rid of the IID. Is it possible? I mean, so can you like reset the sunset date? Say in 5 years you have to come back and reevaluate what you have done. They said 10 years. Maybe 10 years is too long. Is this possible?
So, Commissioner Zagier, yeah. So that's kind of what we've been doing. Let's think. So it was set for in 2015. It was set for 4 years. We came back in 2019, looked at it, made some minor tweaks, and then they set it for another 4 years. And that's why we're back in front of you now. So you can set it for any number of years as you do that. Generally, what you do with what we've used sunset dates in the past for is when you make large changes to something, you're not entirely sure of what the outcome is. You put a sunset date on it to make sure that you come back and take a look at it. The IID in its current state and what's in front of you has really been in place at the very least since 2015, but even longer for most of the provisions in front of you. So we have a pretty good expectation of what's in front of us related to this versus how we've utilized the sunset dates in the past. It also sets an arbitrary date to come back and look at it instead of actually and forces you to go through the full code process when you may or may not need to do so. So this way it gives you a little more flexibility by putting that in mayor and council's hands to be able to do that.
Okay, I have one other question. So all right, so that's what I kind of figured. I just wanted it clarified. So within the IID, you have a lot of things where you have height things, and you're actually can you write in a significant like one parcel, like if that within the IID that there will be at least say a 1.5 to 2 acre park on that site, the Neiman site. So can you say that the city of Tucson owns the property? If they own the property, can't they just say, yes, we promise that there will be a park here? Now, the city may not pay for that park because they're going to work some deal with the developer next door, says, well, part of your 10% open space is going to go, we could include part of this in your park, because this is how the deals work. And then you also have to pay for part of the park to develop it. So in this new, we're reevaluating this, can this be written in to, since the city of Tucson does own the property, they have the say over the property or what happens to it. They can sell it or not sell it. They can develop it or not develop it. Isn't that true?
So, yes, City of Tucson does have control over the property. In general, those are things that don't really occur within the zoning code, but they would occur by mayor and council direction. So mayor and council could consider this and give that direction to say, yes, we want to allocate money and funds to be able to do this and move forward with it. So, you know, it may be a recommendation that goes to mayor and council to look at this in the future. It's not really something that goes in the zoning code necessarily, but it could be something that they provide direction to do so.
But can it go into part of our recommendation to go on to mayor and council?
Sure. Yeah, no, you can make a recommendation to on this to mayor and council, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have another question, Mr. McKansky?
Oh, no, I didn't lower my hand, sorry.
I have a general comment. You know, if you like the urban development in downtown, you have to realize that the current city code does not allow that without significant variances to the code. So that urban feel and, you know, the way downtown's developing really can only be done with the infill incentive district and what's allowed under that code. So I think that's a pretty correct general statement. So any other discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to have a motion for a recommendation to mayor and council for C8 2201 infill incentive district update UDC code amendment. Anyone might want to make a motion?
I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm going to take the McKenzie defense. I'm not familiar with this, so I don't know how to write it. But
you want to put it up on the screen, Dan? With the
Yeah, let me put this up, and you can at least work from this, right?
Oh, okay, good, thank you.
Staff always gets it right when they do it, so you know.
Commissioner Martin, I appreciate your confidence in me.
So you can make your motion what's in quotations.
Okay,
Can you put up the slide that was the individual amendments to or changes, things that we would be recommending?
Good idea.
Yes. Hold on 1 second. No. Sorry, I'm getting there. There. Nope, that's wrong. There we go. And one way that you can do this as well, Commissioner Sajir, is you can state whatever the motion is, and then you can make changes to it. So if you wanted to add something on or something of that sort, you can always do that.
And fumble through it like I did on my last one.
Did a great job.
Well, see, I was just like going, God, I shouldn't have said it. I should have waited before I said anything. So, all right.
You don't have to make a motion if you want to let somebody else make a motion.
Well, let me sit here and see if I can write this down and then maybe vocalize it. If somebody else is more eloquent than I am and can just pop this out of their head immediately, and then we can talk about it. But I can say that I'm not too sure about all the minor ID boundary changes, and I'm also not sure about, as they're currently written, I'm not sure about the individual parking plan integration, but and I think the sunset date should be reinitiated. So, but let me see if I can write this down. If somebody else can. Can I see the other slide, please, real quick?
Sure. Hold on. Sorry, I'm trying to get there. This one right here?
Yes.
Okay. Chair Barton, you have a hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Commissioner McKenzie?
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at this, this text here, recommend approval of the proposed infill incentive district update, blah, blah. And wondering, are we allowed to like add something to this, like recommend approval of this and consideration of certain other, like say, provisions or amendments that mayor and council should look at?
Yes.
Okay.
I think sometimes we've done things where we've made a motion to approve the staff's recommendation or changes, and then with not advice to the mayor and council, but stating our concerns in addition to the approval of the text amendment, to try to let the council know what issues came up in our meeting. So they see the minutes from this meeting, so they'll see the concerns of the commissioners and the concerns of the neighbors. So.
Oh, okay, that's true.
Just as a general question for the commission, is there a consensus on changes that people just do not want to see? Or is there one change in particular that is holding people back?
Can we see the other slide again? Sorry.
I think we'll have to see the motion or hear the motion, and then we'll know about people's issues, I think.
So this is a clarifying question. Why does, I mean, well, why are like the one public comment on the 4 properties in Dunbar Springs that are included in the IID boundary changes? Why are they included? I mean, why, and in that one case, why just these 4 properties as opposed to, you know, these larger swaths of downtown and surrounding areas?
So Commissioner McKenzie, so those properties are currently C3 zones, so they're pretty intensely zoned. They currently have single family homes on them. The IID would allow for, and they're historic properties. So within the IID, you can't demolish or delist a historic property, but it would allow for you to have flexibility on standards to potentially utilize those for something different than a single family home. Underlying zoning, because parking requirements are high and landscaping requirements, if it were to change use, it would make it difficult to do so, if not impossible. So what you end up with is a situation to where you hope that it stays as a single family home if it's not included in the IID. But if someone comes in and basically buys up a couple parcels together, they could potentially demolish those properties and build something that is commercial or office or something of that sort. So that's the reason why you would want, potentially want it in the infill incentive district. It wasn't just those parcels either. It was really all of the C3 that was along Stone on that west side that was there, just because it's such an intense zone.
So the intent was to protect those 4 properties, not have them demolished and developed into something else.
That is correct.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Young?
Oh,
Sorry.
no, and just to clarify that the C3 zone does allow for up to 75 feet in building height, so it is a pretty intense zone.
Thank you.
Does that mean that if it's their historic properties, you can just go in there and bulldoze them then? Or are they protected? Yes.
If the underlying zoning, if you wanted to develop with the underlying zoning, you would be able to. You cannot demolish a historic structure and utilize the infill incentive district.
But you can do it in any other district.
Yeah, unless you're in a historic preservation zone. Most of the city is not. Armory Park, West University, and Barrio Historico are, and El Presidio are the ones in downtown. Those you cannot demolish a historic structure. But outside of there, such as in Dunbar Spring, even though it's a National Register historic district, any property owner could go through and demolish their historic building.
So what's the point of having it designated as a historic building if it serves no purpose to protect it?
Well, so there's tax incentives that go along with it. So the hope is that via those residential tax incentives, I mean, I live in Jefferson Park, I get half off my taxes because I have a contributing historic structure. So they hope that that incentivizes that.
Commissioner Young?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Ortiz-Pino's question, which I think is a good one. You know, and from all of the things that I have heard tonight, all of the concerns, I don't think I have any issues with what is being proposed by staff, because, you know, talking about the historic structures that we were just talking about, I think that this protects them in a way that the current zoning doesn't. I also think that, you know, this idea of a park, which, you know, everybody seems to think is at least potentially a good idea for this parcel. You know, the Menlo Park Neighborhood Association, of which Barrio Sin Nombre is participating or a part of, you know, they're working through the process of developing their neighborhood, updating their neighborhood plan, in which they are discussing this very matter. And I think that from what I have heard, you know, the IID will allow for a park to be there. There's a requirement for open space. There are a lot of mechanisms for engagement with the surrounding community about what should go there. And most of the comments from Menlo Park folks were in favor of the IID. So, I feel like the things that we are concerned about, I don't think that by kind of picking this apart, we're actually making that any better. So, I think I share a lot of the concerns that I heard tonight. I just, at the end of the day, I don't think that what's before us is going to not do that, or to make it so the park can't get built, or it's going to protect the historic structures, and it's going to allow for more affordable housing. So anyway, I guess I would want to go with it as is, and I would have some concerns about kind of picking it apart and having some special kind of exceptions, or I don't know exactly where we're going with this, but I just wanted to weigh in. I think Commissioner Ortiz-Pino's question is a good one, and I just wanted to weigh in on kind of where I am at this point. So,
Mr. Cassidy.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree completely with what Commissioner Young just said, and I would support a motion to adopt it as presented by staff, and also with a recommendation to council to support the park on the parcel that the residents were talking about.
I would also like to maybe add that the sunset date be renewed. I don't know if you do that, to extend it to make sure that things that we are paying attention about the decisions that the city makes, and that we're moving in the right direction, and to come back in another 4 or 5 years to make sure that this actually does get reviewed properly and it doesn't get forgotten and it comes up for public review.
So I'd like to make a comment. I did work a lot on this 10 years ago or whatever with John Burr. And, the process was to have a document that everybody understood, both the neighbors and the developers. And I think there's a lot of protection and a lot of incentive in it. So I would go along with Commissioner Young and support it as is. But we need somebody to make a motion. So
I can make a motion. If Dan can put the slide back up, I'll make that motion. I can give it a try while he's working on that. I move to recommend approval of the proposed IID update text amendment and removal of the sunset date to mayor and council, with the recommendation that council support the park that the Barrio Sin Nombre neighborhood is asking for.
Second. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Second.
Who's that? I'm sorry.
Monica.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
Can we also add a recommendation to consider strengthening I guess in future IID amendments or revisions, to consider strengthening provisions for further reducing car-centric environments, and possibly incorporating the concept of super blocks in the IID structure, which are sort of large-scale development plans used in other cities that create pedestrian throughways and prevent car traffic and promote high-density, residential and commercial units, yada yada yada.
Is that a friendly amendment or?
I think it's friendly.
It's what?
Did you say friendly?
Friendly amendment, yes.
Yeah, if that's the term, yeah. Just a friendly, addition to that, to what we have right in front of us, to, essentially, basically what the words I just gave, or something to that effect.
Is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Well, what about the sunset date?
Just a second.
Oh, sorry.
That recommendation from Commissioner McKenzie was for our recommendation to also include that council have staff investigate those ideas? Is that what that was?
Yes.
I would support that.
And to the second, maker of the second,
So am I missing the sunset date thing?
just a second.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Commissioner Lane, is that acceptable to you?
I'm sorry, I actually missed the addition. If it could be repeated.
I believe it's to, well, maybe Anna can say it.
It was to recommend that council have staff investigate the ideas that Commissioner McKenzie mentioned, which included super blocks and further reduction of vehicular traffic.
Thank you. I still second it.
Commissioner Zagier?
Maybe I'm not getting this. So does this mean that the mayor and council and removal of the sunset date, is that just this sunset date? And does it get, or does that mean that this is just gets put on and then nobody needs to come back and look at it definitely in say 5-10 years?
I think what staff said, it would be reviewed at the will of mayor and council if there were issues that come up with the use of this.
So, and like in the past, there was a sunset date and now you're going to remove the sunset date.
When it was first passed, it was a huge change, the overlay district, and I think in 10 years, we found out how it works and it appears to be working well. So it would just become part of the zoning code.
Yeah. Okay, but I don't agree with that. So if, another question. So during this, if we just we don't have a sunset date on this any longer, can the mayor and council go through and say, make tweaks to the UDC on the incentive district update without coming before the planning commission?
We're just making a recommendation to mayor and council. That's
okay.
They can change it and add the sunset date back.
Okay.
They can tweak it as they did with some of our other recommendations in the past.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. All right.
Yes, they can. So.
All right. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the proposed incentive district update UDC text amendment. Removal of the sunset date. I'm trying to remember and direct staff. One of the recommendations was direct staff to look at other alternative methods to reduce traffic. And I'm sorry, I got to go back to you because I don't remember your first recommendation.
Yeah, I was just trying to. I was just. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody else have that language?
No, go ahead. It was your idea, I believe.
Yeah, I was just trying to capture that in words. Actually, just recommend that or direct staff to consider in future IID revisions, strengthening the provisions for further reducing car-centric environments, and such as the concept of super blocks within the IID structure.
And your first recommendation, Anna, sorry, Commissioner Cassidy.
Yes.
I forgot the first recommendation.
The other recommendation was to ask council to support the park for the Barrio Sin Nombre.
Right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Looks like the vote is unanimous. Do you need a roll call, Dan, or is it?
Nope, I think we're good. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everybody. The next item is item number 5, PDSG staff announcements.
Commissioners, I don't think we have many announcements tonight. Just thank you all for your service on the commission, especially on an evening like this with 2 very important items for the city. We really appreciate your time and all the work you have put into taking in public comment and deliberating on these matters. So thank you for your work on the commission.
Thank you. Next item is item number 6, future agenda items. Staff, let us know what's coming up.
Of course, yeah. So thank you both. Thank you as well. I really appreciate it. And coming up, this may be, I think this is likely our last meeting of the of this year. But in the new year, we will be bringing to you. We have a code consolidation and streamlining package that we're currently working on. So that'll be in front of you. That was directed by Mayor and Council a while back. And then in the future beyond that, there'll be items related to climate change, items related to affordable housing, that sort. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. The next item is call the audience. If there's anyone that would like to address the commission at this time. I don't see anybody. We wore them out, I guess. Next item is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you very much, everybody. I guess have happy holidays. And we'll see you next year.
So I have just one brief question. Scared me. Code consolidation amendments, which I'm really excited to look at. Is there any way that these can be kind of pieced out in small bites rather than all at once? Just asking.
In general, these are pretty small tweaks. So I think they're meant to be as a package. Unlike some of our other amendments, which generally are larger and are heard individually, I guess. So
all right.
Hopefully that's the case. That's the intent.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. Night.
Night.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Thank you, Dan. Good night.